Alright, let me go ahead and make sure that everything is working properly, and once that's set up, we'll go ahead and start the stream. Alright, so it appears to have gone live. That's good, that's good. Let me go ahead and make sure that the chat is working. Just making sure that the stream has been... Just making sure the stream is going on properly. After that, we'll go ahead and start with the first topic of discussion. Let's see... I can see the stream, I can't see the chat. Might become an issue. Just a second, I'm just trying to get this underway so that I can actually see the chat. That's kind of an important thing for the stream. There we go. Hello, Keeper. You appear to be the first one in the chat, at least that I can see. But yeah, this one is probably going to be a bit more of an impromptu stream. I didn't really have the time to set up an event, so I don't expect a lot of people are going to come. Nevertheless, there are quite a lot of things that I do want to talk about in this stream in particular. The Geo Gang. Oh yeah, the Geo Gang. Albedo, he is everything that I expected and more. I had already placed him as one of the best characters that we were gonna get for the longest time. And now that he has been released, and now that it turns out that he's been buffed, quite significantly, might I add, he's honestly busted. Like, legitimately, he is busted. He's definitely one of the best characters that we have gotten as of right now, and I think I will probably rate him as the best support in-game. And that'll become more apparent once I actually start talking about everything that he can do. But yeah, for now, topics of discussion, as you have mentioned, Zhongli got more buffs. My god, I have no idea. They really did not want my video to be outdated anymore. They do want to make him into the best character in-game. And that's something that we do have to talk about at some point. Because there are a couple worries that are actually rising up because of the buffs. And they're not baseless worries. There's a discussion to be had here. But we're gonna go ahead and have that at a later point in time. Right now, the first topic of discussion is we're gonna be talking mostly about Albedo. Albedo is gonna be the first topic of discussion, so let's just go ahead and jump straight into that, shall we? Alrighty. Albedo. My god, is this character something? Is this character something? I know that before the release of 1.2, I had a stream where I wanted to talk so much about it, about Albedo, but that stream got cut short because of other unfortunate situations. But he has now been released, and I have had time to play with him, and look, I have been saying for a while, since even before his release, that this character was going to be busted. And that became apparent the second I look at his first ability. This character is insane. Like, every single part of the kit flows extremely well into the kit of other characters, to the point where he's easily the most flexible character in the game. He can very realistically fit every single role, except DPS. I think DPS is where he struggles the most, and even then, he can still work effectively. It's just not ideal. Don't worry about it. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do. There's gonna be a bot anyways, so you don't have to worry about that. Let's see. The only Geo I don't have is Ning Wong. Oh, Ning Wong is really fun. But you don't have to worry too much about that. A lot of the other Geo characters are also very, very strong. I think Geo as a whole is starting to become one of the stronger types, and a lot of people are not really noticing it right now, but trust me, they will notice it once 1.3 comes around. Geo characters as a whole are starting to look like some of the strongest, most flexible, just all around most balanced characters that we have. Um, so yeah, Geo is looking very, very strong. But anyways, before I digress too much, Albedo. Albedo, as I've been saying, is extremely flexible. He fits into every single role that you can possibly imagine, minus probably DPS, and even his DPS is not that bad. It's not ideal though, and I would not recommend it. Um, but his support is easily the best in the game, being able to rival even that of Bennett and Fischl, which I honestly did not think there would be a character that could rival those two. Albedo most certainly does. And as far as his burst support, his burst is actually very, very strong, especially when you take into account his second Ascension passive, which increases the elemental mastery of the entire team. And that's something that we're definitely going to talk about in a few seconds. Albedo is kind of insane. If I were to put him into my graph right now, his offensive capability is S+, his defensive capability is S+, the resource investment for him is S+, and the payoff is nearing S++. This character is the most broken release we have gotten so far. It's honestly impossible for me to not recommend people try to get the character. Despite this, I still would not recommend that you actually spend money trying to get him. Yes, he is absolutely insane. And if you get him for free, by all means, even at C0, he will be insane. However, I still do not think that the resource investment in trying to get this character is worth the asking price of $200. So keep in mind your money when you're trying to get Albedo. Let's see. Let me go ahead and take a look at the chat. Geo feels like a balanced element. Yeah, consistent energy is the biggest problem of Geo at the moment, but even then, characters like the Geo Traveler actually have some of the highest energy generation in the game, and even Albedo doesn't fall that far behind that category. So Geo is starting to very quickly become very powerful. Do you recommend pulling for Albedo if I already have a Ning and Zhongli on my team composition? Oof. That's a hard one, because realistically, when we think about team compositions in Genshin, we usually have to think about 3 compositions. The one that we use to just do our regular activities, the 2 that we use in Abyss, and the one that we use for boss fighting. That's generally the 3 teams that you're going to want to try to build in Genshin. So depending on how your teams are set up, it might not be a bad idea to roll for Albedo, just because of how flexible he is. If you really want to ask a couple questions regarding that, just wait a little bit into the next part of the stream. I'm actually going to be talking about team compositions that I've built for Albedo, and if you see some of the characters that you already have in those team compositions, it might actually be a good idea to try to roll for the banner. The banner itself has some of the most powerful support characters that we have in game. Like, the entirety of the banner is S at a minimum, with the majority of them being S+. Bennett is S+, Fischl is S+, Sucrose is at a minimum S, and Albedo is most certainly S+. He's honestly getting to the point where I'm considering making him the first S++ character. He is that good right now. What team do I have currently? Oh, you're asking the chat, my bad. I'm still going to talk about the team that I currently have for Albedo. I did actually manage to pull him while I was trying to get a Bennett. Second time. Not angry though. Albedo is absolutely insane. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's start with builds. Builds in particular, that is the one thing that I want to focus on because he has a lot of them. There are 3 in particular that I want to bring attention to, and all of them do one thing incredibly well, and each build specializes in doing something else in addition to that. The one thing that Albedo will always do, regardless of how you build him, is that he will enable Crystallize very, very effectively. Crystallized shields are honestly very underrated. One of the things about crystallized that a lot of people don't realize is that they get damage bonus absorption against elemental enemies. So, for example, if you're fighting an enemy like, let's say, a cryo slime, because I've been fighting a lot of those in Dragon Spine, um, they always have the cryo element attached to them, which means that if Albedo procs that element on them, you suddenly now have a shield that has a 200% extra, 250 actually, extra health bonus against that enemy. And the crystallized shields by themselves, they're not that bad. When you put a little bit of elemental mastery into the mix, as well as just a couple levels to the character that's proccing them, Albedo in this case, the crystallized health of the shield can actually get pretty high, like at a minimum 2000. Add to that the Bolite set and other multipliers, and crystallized shields can become very, very strong very, very quickly. So don't sleep on them, they are very powerful. Oh, yeah, we're gonna talk about Zhongli buffs. He's getting buffed again. It's something that definitely merits a discussion. So we're gonna get to that. Do not worry about it. Um, as for builds that Albedo can enable very effectively, he always has Crystallize. So what you want to focus on is what do you want him to do? Do you want him to be a burst support? He can do that very, very effectively with almost no investment. You can also make him into a character that's very similar to Fischl by just focusing on his E. He can also do that very effectively, and the consistency is even higher than Fischl's. This does mean that Albedo has a lot of potential in what you want for him. And there's a lot of weapons that work very, very well for him. I think the three most standout weapons that I want to bring attention to are the Festering Desire, which is the new weapon that we got for free during this event, as well as the Iron Sting, which is a craftable option that gives elemental mastery as well as elemental damage whenever he does damage. And the last one that I want to bring into attention is the Harbinger of Dawn, which I believe is the one that most people are aware of. That appears to be the one that's getting the most attention right now. And with due reason, it actually competes with the other two options fairly effectively, with almost zero investment into it because it's a 3-star weapon. I do consider this weapon to be the weakest out of the three options. However, because it is so cheap, it is a weapon that almost anybody can get, and it only starts to become outclassed once you actually refine the other two weapons to the highest degree. So as a starting weapon, that is definitely the one that almost everybody is going to gravitate towards, just because of how easy it is to get. The full defense build is probably the best way to build them. You're correct in that, Mito. That is the way that I'm building mine, just because it's so powerful. It's kind of insane. Having defense scaling that's this high on a character like Albedo, who has a base defense of 873, means that a single maxed out defense artifact at Legendary, that'll give you like, what is it, 400 extra defense, just a single artifact? In order for you to get that same amount of damage on another character that scales based off attack, you need a maxed out 4-star weapon as well as the same artifact on attack percentage. And even then, it won't be the same. It's significantly easier to get defense into a character than it is to get attack. So having this on Albedo makes it very, very powerful. And the best part about it is that it's just so easy to get. It's kind of difficult to not go about it, because at that point you can just use the Harbinger of Dawn and again get even more damage. It's kind of insane. If you do have his C2, the defense build is absolutely insane. That is for sure the build that you're going to be going for. But for lower variants, you can also focus attack. It's not the end of the world. The damage difference is not too high, in all honesty, once you take into account the burst. So yeah, you can go with whatever you want. I do recommend defense as the main focus, though. As for the other builds that you can do, you can also make him into a very potent elemental mastery character. I know, this sounds weird. Isn't he a Geo character? What reaction could he possibly trigger? Well, as I was doing my testing, did you guys know that Geo triggers Shatter? Yeah, so that's a thing. Whenever you have a frozen enemy and you hit them with the Geo element, they trigger Shatter, the Shatter reaction, which does physical damage and it scales based off elemental mastery and level. Albedo has a buff that gives him 125 elemental mastery when he uses his burst. In addition to that, one of his best weapons has elemental mastery as a substat. So, combining these two facts, he can actually become a very, very effective elemental detonator for the Shatter reaction. Possibly the best in the game for this particular purpose. And it's not as high damage as something like Overloaded, but it is very, very noticeable. Especially if you manage to time it perfectly to the point where you get the entire frozen duration, and then you shatter at the end of the duration. This amount of CC and damage is kind of insane. So do not sleep on that. Albedo can be a very effective elemental detonator. He is an amazing crystallized support. He has access to the Archaic Petra set. He gives elemental mastery in his kit. His damage is way higher than Fischl's with his E. He is extremely easy to build. This character is crazy. It's honestly to the point where even if you don't have enough to guarantee the pity, I would probably still recommend that you try to get him. Mostly because his banner is so good as well. I've said this before, but Bennett is an S plus character. He has an insane amount of healing and an insane amount of attack buffs. Fischl has an insane amount of damage, and is probably one of the better elemental detonators in the entire game. And Sucrose is possibly one of the best characters that we have for buffing and debuffing, which is something that we're going to get into once we go into team compositions. But yeah, the entirety of the banner is insane. So yeah, again, if you want to use resources on this banner, go ahead. It's probably one of the best banners that we're going to get for quite a bit. But again, try not to overspend. They look extremely tantalizing, don't get me wrong. This is one of the better banners. But I would recommend that you try to watch your spending. Oh yeah, his second ascension also increases the crystallized shield, and I've done the math, and it's about a 50% increase on the shield itself, which is acting as a multiplier to the other parts because it's multiplying the base. So, as I've said, the crystallized shields can get very, very tanky. For a comparison, some of the crystallized shields that you can get are even stronger than Xinyan's shield, which is kind of insane. Then again, Xinyan's shield is not really that impressive. But with that out of the way, I do want to go ahead and talk about team compositions a little bit. Now that we kind of know a little bit of what Albedo does, I do plan on making a full analysis on Albedo. I'm aiming to get it out before New Year's, but I'm just going to be honest, I don't know if I'll be able to. It usually takes me around 17 or so hours to finish an entire video, and doing that in 2 days is probably going to be a bit difficult. But anyways, I do want to go ahead and talk about a couple of the team compositions that I've made for Albedo, both from a theoretical standpoint and the ones that I've actually been able to test. So, we're going to start out with the one that I consider to be the strongest out of the bunch. So, here are the things. Every single character is available. We can use as many constellations as we want, and there are no limits for this. This is entirely purely theoretical team building, and that's going to be how it is. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the strongest team that I was able to produce with Albedo. I want you guys to guess how many 5-star characters, apart from Albedo, are in this team. Once we get a couple results, I'm going to go ahead and show it to you. Just, let's go ahead and think. How expensive do you think it is to make the strongest Albedo team possible? Alright, probably none, probably none. At least one, at least one. Wow, you guys actually got it right. Not a single 5-star character on the strongest team. But go ahead and show the team right now. Here it is. This is the strongest team that I was able to make with Albedo. I call it Albedo and the Boys. This is basically what happens when Albedo makes a K-pop band. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's start to dissect this team, and we're going to go ahead and talk as to why Albedo enables this craziness and just how powerful this team actually is. So, starting with the main character of the show, it's actually not Albedo. The main character of this show is going to be Bennett. Bennett is going to be acting as our main DPS for the entirety of the team. The reason for this is because we're also having Chongyun, which is going to be acting as an infusion support. Probably the only one that we have in the game. Bennett can also technically do it, but his infusion is pretty bad, so don't even bother about it. Yeah. This team is insane. It has some of the most powerful damage scaling that you can get in the game, and it increases every single part of the team and abuses every single elemental reaction to the maximum. Bennett as a main DPS will effectively be using his burst on cooldown. The entire point of Bennett is to have as much energy recharge as possible with as much attack as possible. In order to achieve this, we gave him the Festering Desire in order to maximize the damage of his elemental skill. Because Bennett is going to be an elemental skill DPS. I know that sounds weird, but whenever Bennett bursts, if you have him at second ascension, his elemental skill has a 2-second cooldown. If we combine that with Chongyun's infusion ability, which is Cryo, this means that one of the things we can do is we can basic attack twice with Bennett, then immediately cancel into his elemental skill, basic attack twice, and keep on doing this almost indefinitely. With the attack power that we get from Festering Desire, which increases our elemental skill damage by 32%, as well as giving us extra crit, this becomes insanely powerful. Not to mention the energy recharge that we get from this combination. Bennett will be using his burst 24/7 with almost no investment whatsoever. This means that we can show the squad. Oh my god. I looked at that from the corner of my eyes. That got me. Oh, sorry, that got me. Bennett, yeah, he makes it into every team. So, when it comes to this, he can proc melt every 2 seconds, while still leaving us with 2 instances of the cryo element. One instance we can take for crystallize, and the other one we can take for the freeze. In fact, we can just take it for both. This means that not only do we have a permanent cryo crystallize shield thanks to Albedo, we also have permanent freeze with Xingqiu. And one of the things about Xingqiu is that he just does insane amounts of damage. Like, the damage of this guy is the highest burst damage in the game. He has like 8,000% scaling. This is not an exaggeration, that's his scaling. In addition to that, we also have Bennett, which increases that even further because it increases attack. And since he's proccing the freeze reaction, which Albedo can also trigger, we're getting even more power from it. The elemental mastery from Albedo not only goes towards the shadow reaction, it also increases the melt power from Bennett. Overall, this team is probably one of the strongest teams in the entire game. You have an insane amount of health from the crystallized shields, you have an insane amount of healing from Bennett, you have insane attack power on every single one of your characters, to the point that every one of your characters is a burst support just because of Bennett. And in addition to that, you just have insane amounts of energy generation because of the low cooldown of every single one of the skills. This is probably the most optimized team that you can get around Albedo. Probably around Bennett as well. And And if you really think about it, two out of the 4 parts of this team come from the banner. If you get Albedo, you're more than likely gonna have Bennett into at least one Bennett in your team. So yeah, if you have some of these characters and you plan on getting Albedo, it might be a good idea to try to go for it. I'd say the hardest one to get is probably Xingqiu. Chongyun has already been in a lot of banners, I guess in the Zhongli banner at the very least. So yeah, think about this team for a sec. This is not the only team that I have for you guys. I have made a lot of teams, and I think one of the teams that I'm going to be showing is the boss killing team that I've been trying to make. If a lot of you guys have watched my videos when I do rolls, there has been one particular team that I've been trying to build for the longest time that I call Fire Lake. The idea of this team is to use a very powerful burst hydro burst in order to do as much damage as possible in order to try to one-shot bosses. Let's go ahead and let's move over to the next team, shall we? This is the latest iteration of the Fire Lake team. So yeah, this is the newest iteration of the Fire Lake team, and I hope you like seeing Bennett, because we're going to see a lot of Bennett. Bennett is crazy. So, the entire idea of this team is to maximize the damage of either Mona or Tartaglia in order to one-shot a boss. That is the entire idea. We're going to combo off in order to do 1,000,000 damage. And now, because of Albedo, that number might actually be possible outside of Abyss. I'm not even considering Abyss for this, and this might actually be possible. So the entire combo line here is that we go into either Mona or Tartaglia. We apply the Hydro Elemental status either through Mona's basic attacks or Tartaglia's charge attacks, and then immediately afterwards we go into Albedo. Albedo goes ahead and creates a crystallized reaction, and then uses his burst. Once we grab the Hydro Crystal Shield, we switch into Sucrose. One of the things about Albedo is that his E actually works in the exact same way as Swirl. If you make a crystallized reaction with his E, the element does not get consumed. This is something that's exclusive to Albedo, and no other Geo skill has this ability. This means that when we switch into Sucrose, we still have the Hydro element to apply Swirl. So once we apply Swirl, we can get the Banner Rear defense reduction on that enemy that we're trying to murder. So just from having Albedo and Sucrose, the way why we do this is because we also want to boost Sucrose Elemental Mastery as much as possible. You gotta remember, when we burst with Albedo, we get 125 Elemental Mastery for every character. Sucrose, 20% of her Elemental Mastery gets given to every other teammate when she applies the Swirl reaction. This includes the Elemental Mastery that she gains from other bonuses. So having this order, we're already getting the 125% from Albedo, then we're getting another 120 from Sucrose at a minimum. Realistically, it'll be less, but if we're being honest, you're putting as much Elemental Mastery in Sucrose as possible. So once we do that, we have like 300%, 250, let's just say. We have like 250 Elemental Mastery on our other characters. We still haven't applied the Bennett buff. We can go ahead and we can apply the Bennett buff with his burst, then cancel with his elemental skill, switch into Mona, or Tartaglia for that matter, and try to proc the Vaporize reaction at that point. The amount of multipliers that we have with this particular combo, we're getting 35% from the Hydro Crystallized Shield. We're getting at least 250 Mastery from both Sucrose and Albedo. We are getting 40% reduction from the Banner Rear set. We're getting 100% of Bennett's attack power. We're getting a ×2 multiplier from the Pyro element, and then add to that however damage you have on your crit, however hydro damage you have on your Mona or Tartaglia, and then just how much attack power you have. This is yeah. I don't have my team ready, but I can 100% see somebody getting to 1,000,000 damage outside of Abyss with this particular combination. Mine is not ready. I do not have all the stacks to show it. I am working on that. Once I have it, I will try to one-shot one of the bosses at AR 50. Probably 55 at that point, if I'm being honest, since it'll probably take me a long time. I am entirely free to play. And yes, they do stack. I've tested it out. It's it's something. It's quite something. This is the current team that I'm trying to build. As it stands right now, I need to finish building my Bennett, and I need to finish building my Sucrose. This is nasty. This is absolutely nasty. And you want to know the best part about it? 3 of these characters are in the banner right now, so if you have Tartaglia or Mona, just saying, might be a good idea to roll. As a further note, all of this that I've mentioned is from the base kit alone. You don't need a single constellation. You ideally want to have at least C1 on Bennett, ideally, but it's not needed. So yeah, that is the Fire Lake team. I have more. I have a lot of teams. I think one of the best things about Albedo is that he just fits everywhere. Like, almost every single character in the game has something that benefits from having Albedo on the team. I think one of the better examples of this is when we talk about characters that have elemental infusions, like that of Keqing, Tartaglia, Diluc for that matter, even Chongyun. Characters that have these type of infusions can take full advantage of the crystallize effect, and almost every single reaction in the game has one way of increasing the damage to quite a massive amount. So Albedo being able to increase the elemental mastery of that is quite an effective buff. In addition to having access to the Archaic Petra, in addition to his damage being insane, in addition to his burst being crazy, in addition to him being so easy to build. Oh my god, this character is crazy. But let's go ahead and let's talk about some of the elemental infusion characters. We're gonna start with one of my more favorite ones, probably one of the more expensive ones as well. But this one is the Hazard EDVS team. This one is centered around Keqing as the main DPS, and we want to go ahead and we want to bring as much potential from Keqing as possible. Keqing is a notoriously weird DPS because she is 100% elemental once you get her second ascension. And this would usually be a good thing for most characters, but it actually hurts Keqing in a lot of different situations because she's an Electro character. All of the reactions that Electro has are damage based in a different way, and they scale based off elemental mastery. They don't scale based off attack like Pyro or Hydro with the melt or vaporize reactions. They scale exclusively off elemental mastery. So this means that Keqing has a really bad time trying to get a lot of reactions in that way, because it often just conflicts with what she wants to do. However, she's actually a really, really powerful elemental primer for this reason. And we're going to go ahead and take advantage of that in this particular team by abusing the 2 most powerful damage reactions in the game. Well, without them being multiplicative. The 2 most powerful directly damaged reactions. This particular team uses Keqing alongside Albedo in order to have permanent access to the Bolite set. The Bolite set is something that Keqing absolutely wants in her kit, mainly because it's one of the few ways to actually increase the damage of her charge attacks. The way that a lot of people were previously increasing that damage was through the use of the Thunder Soother set. If you have Albedo, though, switching over to the Bolite set means that not only are you getting a higher damage in 40%, but you're also getting the additional shield strength from the Bolite set. So Bolite set Keqing might become a thing now that Albedo Albedo gives so much access to it. As far as the other two characters are concerned, we have Xingqiu, which is mostly going to be build Elemental Mastery in order to take full advantage of the Electrocharge reaction, although in all honesty, you can probably just go full attack, and you'll probably get more damage out of that. I'll have to do the math. Full attack might actually be the way to go. I feel just the Elemental Mastery from Albedo is more than enough for Electrocharge. But yeah, you're essentially going to be proccing Electrocharge every single time that you attack with Keqing, every single one of her charge attacks, and then we just have Bennett because he's a healer that has an attack buff, and he has a cool element. That's the reason why we're going to see Bennett in a lot of teams. Let's be real here, that's the reason. There's just few characters that give as much as Bennett does, but he's not a necessity. You can easily switch for another character. Let's say Barbara, for example, if you don't have another healer. If you don't have Bennett, Barbara is probably the best replacement in here. But yeah, this one is the EDBS team, the Hazard Squadron. A lot of teams that are centered around Albedo try to take as much advantage of Elemental Mastery as possible, as well as trying to take as much advantage of the Geo element as a whole. Because access to the Archaic Petra is very, very strong. This is having Albedo and Keqing together give Keqing 70% extra damage on the strongest part of her kit. That is not something to take lightly. Combine this with Bennett, which increases the attack power even higher. Keqing with Albedo and Bennett are going to be insane characters to have. So do not sleep on Albedo if you have Keqing. Do not sleep on this banner if you have Keqing. Period. With that out of the way, let's move over to the next team, because Keqing is not the only one who gets advantages from Albedo. I have a lot of teams, by the way. We're going to be here a while. Next team! Fang. Fang is probably one of my more favorite teams, if I'm being honest. While I was testing out for Xingyan, I actually really like Xingyan. I don't have her myself. I was testing on a friend's account, and one of the bigger problems with Xingyan was that my friend didn't have the C2, so I couldn't test a lot of the C2 things. So yeah, I couldn't test a lot of the C2 things, but even then, I still really like Xingyan. The potential for the overloaded build that I showed was incredibly high, and I think this team in particular is one of the ones that's going to take the most advantage of it. Essentially, the idea of this team is very similar to Keqing's. It's just that instead of focusing on Keqing as the main damage dealer, we instead focus on Xingyan as the main one for the Archaic Petra, and then we focus on Racer with physical damage. I think this one in particular is probably going to be one of the more flexible ones as a whole, just because of the element composition that you have. This one does require a couple of very specific characters, however, so it is not the easiest one to build, but it is incredibly effective. I think the hardest part is probably going to be getting one of the cryo healers. Diona is not easy to get now that she's no longer on a banner, and Chi-Chi, she's Chi-Chi. Not everybody's going to have access to her. Let's go ahead and take a look at the chat a little bit. Yes, I actually did get Albedo. I put my summoning on the channel if you want to see it. I got really lucky, I'm not even gonna lie. It's not what I wanted, but it's what fate decided that I should have. And you know what? At this point, I'm not questioning her anymore. Let's see, Albedo plus Racer with Skyward Pride is so good. Yes, that would be really good. Especially if you have a primer that can take full advantage of Albedo, like Xingqiu or Xingyan for that matter. So much damage. So much damage. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and let's keep on moving forward. We have a couple more teams to discuss, after which we're going to be talking about Zhongli buffs and everything alongside that matter. Alrighty. we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about one of the strongest teams, period. This is one of the strongest teams, period. Let's talk about Team Babysitter. Yeah. This abomination is a thing. This is something that exists. A lot of people that have watched me know that I consider Klee to be the strongest character in the entire game. And I don't say that lightly. I think she's the strongest character in the entire game. She's just so extremely hard to play and so annoying to play effectively that I don't like her. I personally don't like her, but I can tell you that she is probably the end boss of Genshin. She is that powerful. It's to the point where you can put Klee with literally anything. You can run 2 Ambers if you want. I don't know how you would do that, but if you wanted to, you could run 2 Ambers and the team would still be powerful. Essentially, let me get the actual team. Let's put the memes aside. There we go. So, essentially, Klee is probably one of the most flexible DPS characters that we have in the game. As I've said, you can legitimately put her with any character in the game, and as long as they have some form of anything, Klee will take advantage of it. This particular team is actually one of the stronger team compositions that you can get. Even Zhongli can take advantage of Klee because crystallized shields and all that. This one in particular, though, takes full advantage of Albedo's crystallized generation as well as the elemental mastery that he provides. And you actually have quite a bit of options regarding with regards to the other characters that you can choose. This one in particular is set up so we use Klee as our primary DPS, and we try to maximize the amount of damage that she can do while she's on the field, while at the same time minimizing the time the other characters take. Essentially, what we do is that we grab characters that can do a majority of their damage without being on the field. Characters like Fischl, characters like, well, Albedo himself, characters like Beto with their Stormbreaker, and then we combine that with the cryo healers we have available in order to get access to Melt, as well as a little bit of extra healing for when things get a little bit complex. If you want the absolute best, like the Whale team, you want a Diona at C6 and a Fischl at C6. It is absolutely completely overkill at that point, like absolute overkill. So there's no point in it. Even at C0, this team will be very, very powerful. The idea is essentially just use the elevator to put Klee in a safe spot. Just spam your charge attacks and just watch as either Stormbreaker or Oz begin exploding everything around you with Overloaded. It is the most hilarious thing to watch. Is it good? Oh, absolutely. Is it efficient? Probably not. You can probably make a better team, if I'm being honest, but I'll be damned if it's not the funniest thing you will ever watch. So yeah, this is Team Babysitter. I really feel bad for Albedo or whoever you choose as the second Babysitter. But yeah, this combination is actually so powerful that you can switch the main DPS with any of the primary DPSs, and you would actually get very similar results with every single one of them. I think the one that shows the most promise is actually Tartaglia, and this was one of the teams that I had at the beginning. This was the team that I was using. I've switched away from this team. For now. I have a different one that I'm going to show at the end. But this was the team that I was using at the beginning. Essentially, what I had was Tartaglia as a Electrocharge primer, as well as a Frozen primer, and the entire purpose of it was to proc Electrocharge as much as possible in conjunction with Beto. I was using Beto, but Fish also works, in order to get as many of the procs as possible with as high damage as possible. Then on the other side, we had Diona, but Chi-Chi also works. Chi-Chi would work infinitely better. I don't have Chi-Chi. We had Diona be a frozen target, which meant that while her burst was active, and while Tartaglia's elemental skill was active, we could freeze enemies pretty much indefinitely for the entire duration of the burst, while at the same time getting access to the shadow reaction and just doing insane amounts of damage with Albedo and Tartaglia. This team is absolutely insane. It has very high survivability thanks to Albedo and Diona, or Chi-Chi if you have her. The damage of Electrocharge got buffed in recent patches. I believe it was 1.1. It is now the highest elemental reaction that's pure damage. It is probably about twice as powerful as Overloaded. Not exactly, it's more like 1.7, but it's getting there. And the fact that all of the team damage is AoE, a majority of the team damage is AoE at least, you can melt, and I mean melt, enemies within seconds. I had not done the entirety of Abyss for like months now because I didn't think I was ready. Once I got Albedo, I started pumping up my artifacts and all that stuff. I deleted every single floor of Abyss with this team within a matter of seconds. I think 8-3, which is where I was having a lot of problems. I was having a lot of problems in the first stage because I didn't have any characters that could trigger Overloaded properly. The only one that I had built at the very least was Xiangling. I had my Fischl, but my Fischl was not ready at the time. I was struggling super hard. I cleared that stage in a minute, just because of how powerful Electrocharge was, and spreading the damage. It was insane. It is absolutely insane how much you can get with enemies that are grouped together. It legitimately lags the game. It is hilarious. It is actually hilarious. I might try to show a little bit of that in the actual video for Albedo. I'm not entirely sure if I should. But yeah, Styx Helix. This one is one of the more fun ones. The last one that I want to show with this particular core is the one for Diluc. And again, it is the exact same core. It's just a different main DPS. In this case, it's Diluc. We essentially switch Electrocharge with Overloaded, and we switch Frozen with Melt. This one is significantly more powerful in the single target department, especially against bosses that can't be knocked away by Overloaded. And yeah, this one's definitely a team killer, or a boss killer team. You will do a lot, and I mean a lot of damage with the same core. If you have Albedo, you definitely want to look at this particular core, trying to get either Chi-Chi or Diona with either Fischl or Bido. That will pretty much mean that any elemental DPS that you get will probably be able to fit into his team and make the most out of it. But yeah, this is the last elemental infusion team, and then I'm going to go ahead and show the team that I'm currently using. The name is still to be decided. I put the team name that I have at the moment. I'm not too happy with it, so I might change it at some point. This is the Fate Arcan team, and it essentially works in a very similar manner, and this one is more tailored to my needs, because my Tartaglia is not C6, and I do not have any way of maintaining his elemental prowess consistently, so I do need a secondary character that can take over that role, and I was using Bido, but I recently switched my build with Bido to have more energy recharge, and I lost way too much attack power to make that a viable option, so I needed something else, and I got Bennett recently, and I'm leveling up Bennett now, and now we have the Festering Desire, so I'm basically just using Bennett as a secondary DPS and damage booster. When I have the Bennett burst on the field, I can just use Albedo burst, and it's like I had build them full power, and it's kind of insane. It gets to some pretty crazy numbers if it crits. Same with Bido, and Tartaglia is just Tartaglia. He's going to be insane regardless of what I do. Archer class Tartaglia, yeah. Definitely not an archer, I'll tell you that much. He does more damage when he beats people with his bow rather than shooting with them. But yeah, this is currently my team. This is a team that I'm trying to build. Bennett is not fully there. Um, there is. There are so many teams that Albedo can enable. It's kind of insane. I've shown like 7 already, and those were only the teams that I could come up with in an hour. I'm sure that more people can probably come up with better, stronger teams as the game keeps on going forward. And as we keep on getting more characters, all of Albedo's strengths are incredibly, incredibly flexible. Like, they are generic as hell. You can get damage bonuses with Archaic Petra for all 4 of the main elements, and you can also get Elemental Mastery, so any team that wants to get elemental reactions going will get a benefit from Albedo. Not to mention the constant Crystallize. This character is absolutely insane. It is very difficult for me to not recommend rolling in this banner. If you have a lot of saved up Primogems, I don't think this is going to be the only chance that you'll get to get a powerful team, but the fact that you can get a powerful team this easily with this character is probably something that's worth looking into. Where did I get the numbers for Electrocharge? There were some data gatherers that were gathering a lot of data for Electrocharge, and I also tested it out myself. The thing about Electrocharge now is that whenever you proc Electrocharge, it does the same damage of the initial proc 3 times. So that means that for somebody like my Babysitter, who has, I think my Babysitter is currently setting at like 250 Elemental Mastery. Whenever I proc Electrocharge with her, she does 2,000 in the initial hit, and then she leaves a dot that does another 2,000 twice. So in total, I end up doing 6,000 damage with 1 Electrocharge reaction. And the buff stacks, so it can trigger multiple times. So it's a lot of damage. When I tried the same thing with Xiangling, I was only getting about 3,000 with Overloaded, so I'm getting an extra 50% from Electrocharge. The 1.7 is mostly because it's mostly from my own testing. I'm not entirely sure of the exact numbers. I'm sure other people have done it. My numbers are pretty shaky as it is. I only have my own testings to go about. So yeah, essentially, Ronin, we are pretty much just talking about Albedo compositions. We have showed quite a lot of Albedo compositions. He is an insane character that can do a lot of things. He can do a lot of things. I actually wanted to show a lot of these compositions in the video that I was preparing for Albedo, but if I did that, the video would probably last like 40 minutes. So I think it's for everybody's interest that I try to shorten that one to as concise as possible, and instead go more in depth in like a live stream format. I might even make a separate video exclusively talking about team compositions for Albedo. I'm not entirely sure about that one. I'll have to see if that's something that's necessary or not. But with that out of the way, that's pretty much all that I wanted to mention regarding Albedo. I am trying my best to get the analysis before New Year's. I'm not entirely sure if I'll be able to, but that is my current goal. As I've said, it takes me usually like 17 or so hours to get a video done, so I'm gonna go ahead and try my best. Oh, you got Gene? Congratulations. Gene is actually very, very good. But yeah, with that out of the way, I do want to move over to the next topic, and this one's probably going to be a bit of a serious one, because it could have a lot of implications for the future of Genshin, depending on what MiHoYo does. So we're going to be going ahead and talking about the big man himself. We're going to be talking about Zhongli. So today, at like 12 a.m. my time, MiHoYo decided to release a new statement regarding Zhongli. In that statement, they mentioned that beta testers from the new version are saying that Zhongli was still felt very weak in a lot of scenarios, and that's fair. I also knew that he was going to be very weak in scenarios like co-op as well as non-Geo teams. That's something that I've been mentioning for quite a while, that is the design of the character. That is his flaw. MiHoYo decided that it was not good for him to have this flaw, and they buffed him. They decided that it would be in everybody's best interest to give the shield that Zhongli generates, the shield that I already say is like 2 Diona's health in one. You're basically stapling 2 Dionas together and using that as a shield. It now has an aura, at least in the beta test, it now has an aura that reduces all resistances by 20%. Oh boy, is this sounds simple. This sounds simple. This one change has an insane amount of implications. It's kinda hard to ignore. Do I think the change was needed? No, not really. I did recommend that the shield should have some sort of buff, but even my recommendations are very tame in comparison to this. Defense reduction is the strongest type of buff that you can get a character, because it directly influences the defense of a character. And when it comes to elemental resistance as a whole, if you go into the negative, that actually turns into a multiplier for damage. And it's not the same multiplier as the one that you get from your artifacts. It's a different multiplier, which means that it stacks with the others. So being able to stack defense reduction, or elemental or resistance, my bad, being able to stack resistances is one of the strongest damage bonuses in the entire game because of this fact. It stacks with everything else in a multiplicative fashion. It is not an additive bonus, it's a multiplicative one. So, because of this, we do not know the details right now, but in its current iteration, one of the things that the buff said was that the effect cannot stack. When you look at that, you probably think that's balanced, but you actually have to take a deeper look into the meaning of that. We gotta remember that MiHoYo is a Chinese company at the end of the day, so a lot of the translations come from Chinese. Chinese has a lot of implications attached to the language in the same way as English does, and the implications of effect cannot stack, the implication for this particular text is not talking about the defense reduction. It's talking about the aura. This means that 4 Zhonglis and co-op can't reduce somebody's defense by 80%. However, what about the Ben-Arir set? What about Superconduct? What about Xinyan? All of these things have resistance reduction to the kit. Can we stack them with Zhongli? We just don't know, and I don't think MiHoYo does either. And depending on the answer, that this could legitimately make Zhongli into the absolutely best character the game has. Period. His damage potential is already S tier with the first buff that he got. Just that alone was enough to bring him into the S tier, competing with Keqing in terms of damage, and probably out DPSing Razor already. I would still have to look into the numbers for that. If this buff goes through, he will, by far, be the most powerful character in the game. Now, do I think this will remain this way? Probably not. If I'm being honest, there are too many ways to abuse this type of buff, or debuff to be more precise, to the point where it took me like 5 minutes of thinking to break it entirely. Do you remember the team that I was describing, the Fire Lake Bloom team? Yeah, switch Albedo for Zhongli in this state, and let's see what you get. You still get the Archaic Petra set from Zhongli, because, again, Zhongli can do that. Geo character and all that. You don't get the Elemental Mastery, but the Elemental Mastery wasn't that big of a bonus. It ended up being like I think 12% or something around that line. Now you get 20% reduction with Zhongli's shield. 20% reduction becomes even stronger once you apply Sucrose to that mix, which adds another 40% reduction, to the point where almost every enemy in the game, I don't even think there's a single enemy with 60 resistance, you're going to be doing 60% more damage. And this is a multiplicative effect. This is not additive. Elemental Mastery is additive. This is not. I think this bonus would be better than Venti's if you think about it, because Zhongli would have 35% extra from the element itself, and then he would have the 20% extra from the resistance reduction. These two multiply, so you end up with 0.2 times 35. Yeah, it becomes higher. It becomes a lot higher than the 40% that Venti can provide. Yeah, Venti can do higher with Anemo, but let's be honest, Anemo as a whole is already not a good elemental type. Does Zhongli mess up with elemental reactions, though? He does, but here's the thing. The archaic, it only adds like 1 second of extra setup, because what you do is that you just have to mark the target twice. It's not that much extra. And for this amount of damage, again, you want to make one hit as high as possible in the Fire Lake build. This type of extra buff, when we're talking about numbers that are like under 500,000, the extra second is almost like another 100,000 damage added into the mix. So it is more than worth it. In addition to this, as far as we're concerned, this seems to stack with the Geo buff that he already has. So think about it. Think about this for a second. Having Zhongli plus any other Geo character, preferably the Traveler, just from having those two characters alone, we already have a 35% defense reduction, in addition to a 15% damage increase, in addition to whatever the other character can provide. The pillar for Zhongli got buffed as well. And for people that watched my video on Zhongli in particular, the Geo Traveler and Zhongli together, they can make 7 resonances, out of which only 5 can stack together, but still, 5 of those resonances, the pillar got buffed. The pillar got buffed. I have to reiterate this. As it stands right now with the numbers that we have, the damage of the pillar, each pillar, is almost equivalent to Oz in terms of damage. So if we have this, with the Traveler, with the defense reduction, with all the damage bonuses that we can get, 5 pillars stacked together against an enemy boss means that, I'm doing the numbers quickly, that's almost like 1,200 damage every second. Every 2 seconds, my bad. That's a burst worth of damage every 2 seconds. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. The biggest mistake was to announce this without even testing it properly. I don't think that was a mistake, actually. I think they're being very honest as to what they want, and they've already told us what they're looking for. They're essentially asking for our advice on the matter. And my advice on the matter is, do not do this. This is absolutely busted. I will break it half a time over. Just don't do this one. Don't do this one. What I would recommend, I don't think the idea is bad. I think the idea overall is to give Zhongli a reason to exist outside of single player. Because Zhongli, as it stands right now, he has a lot of power, but he doesn't really bring that much when you take him out of Geo teams. So giving him a generic buff that helps the entire team is a good thing. It's just, don't go with this one. This one's too busted. My recommendation would be to switch defense reduction for damage bonus. Essentially give him the same bonus that we had during the Unreconciled Stars event, and that will probably give the same result that Mihoyo wants without breaking the character. It's still going to be strong, don't get me wrong, that's a lot of power, but it wouldn't be as busted as this. A lot of people think the resistance lower does not stack with similar effects. Again, this is from the version of the text. The text implies the aura does not stack. That's what the text implies. This does not mean the defense reduction does not stack. Defense reduction as it stands right now in the game does stack. You can stack Xinyan's C4 with Superconduct, no problem. So I would assume that you would be able to do the same thing with with the Zhongli buff, because I don't expect the Zhongli buff to be complicated math. Genshin has to be super optimized to be able to run in phones, and even then, it still has troubles doing so. So adding complicated math that would have multiple blockers in order to test whether it's stacking with other things just wouldn't do. More than likely, what they just did is that they just had a is Zhongli near? Yes, no. If Zhongli near, add debuff. That's probably what they did. I don't expect that they have more complex math in order to get this to work. The way that it stands right now, it more than likely stacks with other defense reduction. Do you think they're going to nerf his HP scaling on the normal attacks? I honestly think that the first HP scaling they gave us was perfect. I don't think it should go higher, I don't think it should go lower. Do I think they're going to nerf it? If this change goes through, probably. If this change goes through, I think they're probably going to cut in half his DPS potential. Because this change is going to be insane if it goes through in this direction. I don't expect it to, in all honesty, because just having this is super risky for Genshin as a whole. And especially when it comes to Zhongli. Zhongli is already the riskiest character that Genshin has in the game. Because of the resistance. Because of the resonance damage of the pillar. Adding on to that, resistance reduction is very, very dangerous. Especially when you have two ways of accomplishing that now. If you get more ways in the future, I just don't see any enemy that would be able to challenge Zhongli in any meaningful manner. Zhongli is already probably one of the tankiest characters in the game. If the HP scaling buff goes through, he's probably going to be one of the highest damages in the game. And if this new change goes through, he's probably going to be one of the best supports in the game. They're very clearly trying to turn him into Albedo. And yeah, these new changes, they look like he'll make him way better. Way, way better, to the point where it's too much. Here is where the other part of the conversation begins to start, and that's power creep. One of the reasons why a lot of people were very worried about Zhongli getting buffed in the first place, at least the people that didn't look at the numbers properly, was power creep. A lot of people were worried that as the game would keep on going forward, that MiHoYo was gonna have to bring stronger and stronger characters to the banners in order to sell product. This is not a false idea either. We've seen this happen with multiple games. Power creep is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And even Genshin is already starting to prepare for power creep by introducing us to dilutions this early on. I fully expect that at some point in this game's life cycle, we're gonna get access to dilutions. And they're more than likely gonna work in a similar fashion to the artifacts that we have right now. If somebody has played Neverwinter, I fully expect them to work the exact same way as relics, where we get a cooldown for powerful dilutions that we can activate, and that's likely going to become the new power creep for Genshin. We're likely going to be getting banners of, oh, do you want the character? Oh, do you want the weapon? Oh, do you want a dilution? I fully expect that that's going to happen in the future. That's what I'm expecting, but having a character like Zhongli, who's this very clearly busted in every single regards, if these buffs go through, again, I don't think this buff is going to go through. More than likely, we're going to see a damage bonus instead of a defense reduction. It's just the safest option, in all honesty. I don't think we're going to get rid of power creep. It's something that's just going to happen. What I would like to see is that characters that were starting earlier on get leveled up alongside the rest of the characters. That is a lot of work, though, so I'm not sure if it's going to happen. The way that Genshin is doing balancing is actually very, very smart. They're not balancing characters, they're balancing artifacts, and they're balancing around characters instead. Like, we got the original change that we got to Zhongli, which as it stands right now, is the only character that has ever gotten buffed, was directly to HP scaling. They didn't buff the scaling directly, they gave him another ability. A very smart change that will likely not increase the power level through power creep anytime soon. This one, though, this one might be the one that changes that. Defense reduction is, or resistance reduction is probably the strongest form of debuff that we have available. And giving this much to a character that's already as consistent as Zhongli, who already does as much damage as he does, who already has as much utility as he does, is very dangerous. I understand the reasoning, I just don't think that this particular way is the way to go about it. Putting this type of buff on his shield is very, very strong. If it was on his burst, it would probably be more bearable, just because Petrify lasts for so long, it wouldn't be abusable. But as it stands right now, this is better than Xinyan's buff. This is better than any buff that we have available right now for physical characters. And when it comes to elemental characters, we can stack this so highly with characters we already have available, like that of Sucrose and Venti, that it's very easy to get to 1,000,000 damage on most characters. So, do I think this buff is a good one? No. Do I think it's a sound one and a good starting point? Yeah, actually. I don't have a problem with the idea of buffing the shield. That was already one of the recommendations that I did, because Zhongli, if they want to make him a support, he does need a generic buff. It can't be exclusively Geo unless you want to make him only a Geo support. MiHoYo very clearly wants to make him a jack of all trades, so they do have to give him a buff that's very powerful, or very generic, and that people still want. And since they also want to put a focus in co-op, because Zhongli has a lot of co-op things, mainly in his C2, I believe, is the one that also gives shields for co-op partners. I like where they're going, but they're definitely targeting the wrong thing. I don't think they would have given specific numbers if they were not pretty sure that these will get to live game. More than likely, they're looking at the... this is more than likely what happened. They were taking a look into the numbers they wanted to use in a vacuum without taking into account other defense reductions. And that's how we got to what we got. Because if you take a look at the numbers in a vacuum, the defense resistance or reduction for most characters in this specific number will end up being like a 10% increase. Probably a little bit more. 20% against certain enemies, like the full 20% against certain enemies. So yeah, in a vacuum, this is fine. This is a completely normal buff that doesn't break anything. It's when you start stacking other things that the buff becomes way too powerful. Like the second you stack the Venereer set, the second you stack Geo Resonance, the second you stack character bonuses, the second that you begin stacking things like crit, things like Vaporize reactions, melt reactions, elemental mastery bonuses, that's when you start getting the crazy numbers. And I don't think they had a look at that as it stands right now. If it does go into the game as it stands right now, Zhongli is unquestionably the strongest character we have available, and it's unlikely that we're gonna get a character that's stronger than him unless they pull some very crazy shenanigans. I actually would not like that to be the case. And I'm the guy that really, really wanted Zhongli to be powerful. But I don't want him to be this overwhelmingly powerful. But yeah, that's gonna be the that's gonna be mostly what I want to talk about Zhongli. I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at the chat, and we're gonna go ahead and move over into Q&A. So let me go ahead and give me 1 sec because the chat broke. I'm gonna go ahead and refresh this really quickly.
the chat.
Oh,
and
no, echo. There we go. Alrighty, now I can see chat again. He is the Geo Venti now. Yeah, he's pretty much the Geo Venti if this goes through. He's stronger than Venti if this goes through. Let's see. The only other 5-star character would be in need of a buff right now would be Chi-Chi. I don't actually think Chi-Chi would need a buff anymore. The new ice set for the new set for Cryo actually made Chi-Chi significantly stronger than what she appears to be at the moment. Her healing potential is absolutely insane now. It's more than enough to guarantee a 5-star treatment. Jean by herself is also very, very powerful. A lot of people sleep on Jean. Her numbers are insane. Her numbers are just insane. Let's see. Let's take a look at the other comments. He's a Geo Shredder, which is something nice. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be the case, because the amount. The thing about Shred is that it's for everything. It's not only one thing. Venerier said it's only one piece of damage. Zhongli is everything. And he also has access to the Archaic Petra. Before, he only had access to the Archaic Petra. Now he has basically 2 extra lives for a lot of characters. He has insane damage with the Crescent Pike. He has insane damage with the Resonance. He has access to the Geo Shred. He has access to the Geo bonus. He has access to the shield reduction. He has access to the every buff available from the shield portion. It's a lot. It's a lot. I don't think there's any other character apart from Albedo who can even compare. Let's see. Wanna move this buff to his ultimate? That would probably fix a lot of the problems. It would not get rid of the top end potential. It would still break a lot of the game, but it would be significantly easier to balance. Because now you only have to worry about this happening once every 15 seconds, which is something that you already have to worry about with characters like Sucrose, so it wouldn't be anything new, it would just be another alternative. I think that might be the smartest buff, the smartest change. If they do want to go this direction, that might be the way to go. Let's see, beta test started on the 29th. They pushed the news out on the same day. When you properly test something, don't tell us in detail what you do. Yeah, I get the idea behind that, but I also get the idea that they want to be very transparent. That is definitely something that they definitely want to be doing that right now. It was lack of transparency that got them in this mess, and them telling the community what they're looking at is probably the way to go about it. They probably should have taken a second look at the numbers. They most certainly should have taken a second look at the numbers. Because as soon as somebody like me, who is absolutely going to break your entire work trying to get the maximum damage possible, takes a look at this, they are going to break it. It took me 5 seconds to think about probably like 5 minutes to be realistic, to think about the Fire Lake composition and just how much damage that could potentially get to, and it's not even something that's hard to accomplish. There's a lot of characters that can get to that scenario, and there's going to be a lot of characters in the future that are also going to get to that scenario. Just think about it. Whenever we get a character that has a burst similar to Tartaglia that's Pyro, you can just do the same thing with Melt, and Melt has even a higher potential. The reason why we use Hydro right now is because we don't have a character that can take advantage of Melt. It's not even the highest damage potential that we have in the game. That is most certainly Pyro. So just leaving the door open seems very dangerous. The Venerier said, the Archaic Petra said, they're already insanely strong. I don't recommend adding more things that do the same thing, that can stack with these bonuses. That's how you really accelerate power creep. Oh boy. Zhongli can cleanse group enemies, create consistent energy, and can create reactions. That is true, but you gotta keep in mind that his pillar got buffed. Like, his pillar got buffed. His pillar got buffed. I have to say it 3 times because I don't believe it. I've said it in the video, but buffing the pillar This pillar that Zhongli has is an ability that's just waiting to be broken. Already, with just the resources that we have, without the buffs, we can get the pillar to do an insane amount of damage. Once we get the buffs, this pillar is going to become insane. So adding on to that even more things that we can stack over, there's no way this character isn't the strongest character in the game. He can do DPS, he can do defense, he can do support, he can do burst. He's very, very strong now. Like, insanely strong. Best character level strong. Bennett is pretty overloaded with his kit as well. He does a lot. One of the reasons why Bennett is so powerful is because of the heal. The attack bonus is also insane, don't get me wrong. 700 attack bonus, just with no investment whatsoever, is kinda crazy. Being able to get that to like 2000 is just insane. Most characters peak out at like 1900 attack, with very few characters being able to pass the 2000 mark, usually requiring insane artifact rolls or being Diluc with a Wolf's Gravestone. But yeah, it's not easy to get high attack in Genshin, so having a character that press one button, you now have maximum investment legendary artifacts and weapons on any character that you want is very strong. The thing is, with a character like Zhongli, now those two things stack. So, yeah. Even more damage bonuses. Stop it with clan characters strongest. I mean, I do realize that I do that a lot, but the main reason why I call a lot of the characters strongest is because they legitimately are. And Genshin is at the end of the day, Genshin is a power fantasy. Almost every character gravitates towards the strongest side of the game, with damage differences being like 100 or 200 in difference. Almost every character in the game can become exceedingly strong. The characters that stand out the most are usually the ones that do it either in the easiest fashion, with the least investment, or just the ones that have the highest numbers. So I don't think it's inaccurate to call characters part of the strongest group. Granted, that group is starting to quickly grow quite highly, so I might need to search for another word. What do you think about Albedo Venti comp? I prefer Sucrose, if I'm being honest. The advantage of Venti is that he can group enemies together. That is his big selling point. He also has really high energy generation just because of the way that the burst works. Overall, he's not a bad character. I do think a lot of people rate him a bit higher than where he should stand. Just because the end potential is not super high unless you have constellations, which most people won't. He's not bad by any means, though. He's still very, very strong. Full HP, the new way to go? No. I don't think full HP on Zhongli is going to be the new way to go. At least with the numbers that we have right now, full HP investment will lose you a lot of damage. I still recommend geo damage, crit rate, attack percentage. That's probably going to be the best way to go. Still. You're probably a main DPS Noel right now. That's my boy. I love Noel. Sorry, my bias is going to show. Geo is insanely OP if you use it wisely. Crystallize is very, very underrated. Defensive capability is not something to take light of. It's probably so underrated because a lot of people focus a lot on time trials because of Abyss. But taking it out of that one category, being able to survive is often way stronger than being able to do one very powerful hit. So characters that can do both are very, very valuable in my books. But again, this is just coming from a background from places where raids were very important. What's wrong with power creeping anyways? It's a PvE game after all. Yeah, this is a good point. Look, there's no PvP involved, so you're not gonna ruin somebody's day by bringing a C6, I don't know, C6 to look to a co-op game and one-shotting a boss. Maybe you will if you do it maliciously. I don't think there's a way to do it maliciously in Genshin. Um, the problem with power creep is that whenever a game begins to power creep everything they do, that's usually when the game begins to die. And a lot of people see this very quickly. When there is one character that very clearly outweighs every other option in the game, you start to think, what's the point of me trying to get other characters if this is the one that's going to be doing everything? The best example that I have is from me playing Warframe and me getting Octavia. This for people that have seen Warframe. Octavia in that game is a character that can kill every character in the game by pressing one button and going to a corner. That is how broken that character is. When you have characters like that, every new piece of content becomes less enticing, unless that new piece of content is the character. So once you begin going into this line, power creep becomes exponential. And within a matter of like a year or two, the game that you're playing is completely different to the game that you started with. The biggest problem here is not that Zhongli is absolutely the most busted character in the game. He kind of is, if these buffs change, go through. The problem is that this could be the start of that. And if that is the start of that, that proves very, very dangerous for a game like Genshin. Because Genshin as a whole right now, it seems to have a very healthy life cycle. I don't expect anything bad to happen to Genshin until like year 6 or 7. But having something like this early on could accelerate the fall. And a lot of people are worried that that's something that's going to happen. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not. For as much things that miHoYo does that don't seem logical, they do actually have a lot of very smart game designers in their game. You can tell that if you just look at the way that the game is built. They have a lot of very smart people. My only worry is that they're not going to listen to them, and that the game's going to spiral out of control. I don't think that's going to happen, but this is one of those first signs that you get of when a game is going to go that direction. But yeah, that's the main reason why power creep is something that worries a lot of people. Not because in itself it's something that's bad, it's something that's gonna happen. Power creep is inevitable. It's always gonna happen. Not a matter of if, it's just when. We just want Genshin to live a healthy life, and we want it to entertain us for as long as possible. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want from the game. We just want to have fun. And the power level that we have already, we still have challenges. We're not in Warframe. There's still things that can kill us. There's still things that we have to plan for. There's still things that give us excitement about fighting. If you really want to see a game where power creep has gone completely out the window, Warframe is my example. Because in that game, the meme of that game is you get a Riven and you just one-shot everything in the game. And it's not false, you one-shot everything in the game. There is no challenge to it. And that stops being fun really, really quickly. Which is why a lot of people are worried that would happen to Genshin. I don't think it's going to happen again, but this is one of those things that could lead to it happening, hence why there's so much backlash about it. I do think he should be powerful. I don't think he should remain as he is right now. I just don't want him to be overwhelmingly powerful. I think Albedo is already going along that line, but even Albedo has his own weaknesses. He's not perfect in every scenario. There are characters that don't synergize with him. This type of buff would remove every negative that Zhongli has, to the point where he's too much of a jack of all trades. Just the HP scaling buff, I think, is enough. And if they want to buff him in this particular scenario so that he can become relevant in other parts of the game, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I think that's probably the way to go about it. I just don't think this particular change is the way that you accomplish that. They definitely need more iterations, and I think the community should definitely tell them that. If they're gonna add something like this, I would rather it be like the base design of another character, not something that's tacked on to Zhongli. Genshin right now is in a weird balance area. The banners have been getting weaker, but the characters are still really strong. Yeah, as it stands right now, that is kind of what Genshin is trying to do in order to avoid power creep for as long as possible, rather than just copy pasting the previous banner character and adding more stuff. They're trying to make more specialized characters. Like Tartaglia, for example. We can all agree that Tartaglia is insanely powerful. But the thing about Tartaglia is that he is very high investment and he only fits into very specific teams. So the balancing point of Tartaglia is that high investment and it is that lack of flexibility. The same thing is going to go for Ganyu. Ganyu is looking to be very, very strong as a DPS option because from what we saw, she's capable of doing 500% scaling within 2 seconds. Again, this is not the craziest thing ever. It is AoE though, so we gotta keep that in mind. There's a lot of characters that can do this, Klee being like the most standout of the bunch. But there's very, very few characters that can do that with the cryo element who also get a lot of bonuses from it. So Ganyu is extremely strong, but she's also very niche. She won't fit into every character, which is a good thing. And I think that's something that the initial buff for Zhongli also did. Very, very strong, but also niche. He could only fit into geo compositions, and this new buff kinda removes that aspect, which is what's pushing it too far. I don't think that every character should be able to do everything. I think they should be able to specialize in 2 or 3 things, but they should still have weaknesses. I think Noelle, if Noelle was any measure stronger, she's already insanely powerful, but if she was any easier to get to her C6, you would probably see everybody running Noelle. I think Noelle is probably the craziest design that Genshin has. Let's see. To be honest, about miHoYo balance, many 5 stars are underpowered and many 4 stars are better. Yes, this is true. It does seem that miHoYo balances out with regards to future plans. It seems like it's something that they do, because if we think about it, characters like Chongyun, if we think about Chongyun in the base game, he only fit like in 1 or 2 categories. Even the DPS, well, good, it wasn't anything too super strong. But then they released new content. We have 1.2 now, and we have the Ice Cryo set, and now Chongyun is probably one of the better DPSs in the game. There are characters that are probably designed with future content in mind that we just don't have the pieces for. And I think Xingyan is another example of this, because Xingyan is very, very strong if you get her to the point where she is very strong. But she's clearly lacking a character that can take advantage of her. Which is something that we're probably going to get in the future. So, do I think this is the best way to go about it? In the short term, no. And they'll probably lose them quite a lot of money for it. But in the long term, which is what Genshin appears to be going for, they've already shown us that they have like 7 years planned. That's probably the way that you want to do things. You don't want to have a hurdle that you keep on going over every time. You want to try to keep as many characters as balanced as possible, where they're very strong in very specific situations, but they're not overwhelming in that category, which is where we're starting to sit. One of the reasons why I say strongest characters is because, again, when they're in their niche, a lot of these characters feel insane. It's just getting them to that point. I like the buff, but it's such a weird area, but I'm a Zhongli main, so I'll take it anything. Yeah, honestly. I feel bad for the people that rolled for Zhongli because of my video um, at the beginning, because the way that I did that video, I analyzed it based on the data that we had at the time. I was not expecting them to hit this character so hard. So the buffs are definitely a nice addition. I do think that this last one might be pushing the boundary a bit too much. I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're gonna release it as is. I do certainly think that we're either gonna get a reduced version, probably like 10%, or we're just gonna get 10% damage bonus instead. I'm not super worried about it, even though it is something that we should keep an eye on. I think there'll be content where we might need OP Zhongli. Oof. Honestly, I'm kind of hoping for it. I think one of the biggest bugs that I have right now with Genshin is that ever since I got to AR50, it keeps on telling me that every place that I go is highly dangerous, just because I'm 20 levels underpowered and I'm still killing everything. I know it's not a bug, I'm being dumb. But I do think that Genshin does need more difficult content. And I don't mean like Abyss difficult where a timer is what restricts you. I mean like content like Tartaglia, where you have to play smart. You can't just smash buttons. I think that's what Genshin probably needs. And if we're gonna get that in the future, I think that's probably a good thing. The second they start adding elemental shields to bosses, though, that's where I draw a line. Do not do that. They're not gonna nerf anyone. I doubt they're gonna nerf anyone. If they start going that route, they will have the pain of their lives. Not even from us. If you think our community's toxic, have you seen the Chinese community? Yeah, they're walking a very fine line, so I doubt they're gonna nerf anything. If we care about balance that much, then nerf Venti or Bennett, or else just go crazy. See, I think that's the thing, because it's not about caring about balance. Having a balanced game is never fun. We have a lot of games that are perfectly balanced, but they're not fun. It's about being able to have characters that feel overpowered without them actually being overpowered. That's kind of a very fine line that you're going with, because in order to do this, you need characters that feel very strong in a lot of scenarios, but they're not very strong in every scenario. You need weaknesses for the characters. Like Bennett, he has weaknesses. If you do not focus energy recharge, it's not his burst won't remain in the same way. If you're fighting very mobile enemies, you won't be able to stay on the attack boost. You're gonna have to move away from it. If there are enemies that have very powerful attacks where you can't stand still in a short area, again, that's another weakness. And Bennett can't cover that for every scenario. He's really good, he's insane, but he has weaknesses. So he fits into the category of things that you want. A character that, when you use him properly, you feel amazing, but you won't get that effect all the time. You will have to watch positioning, you will have to put a lot of investment into it, you will have to keep an eye out on different things, you have to cover for those weaknesses. And that's kind of one of the things. The same thing goes for Venti. A lot of people consider Venti to be very powerful because he groups enemies. And yeah, he's very powerful. In Abyss, he's probably one of the better ones. But the second that you take him against boss fights, what does Venti do in boss fights? He throws an arrow at Duvalin and it misses like half the time. He has weaknesses, he has strong points, but he's not the strongest. And that's a good thing, that's not a bad thing. That's how you get those amazing moments where you finally beat a boss that you've been struggling for so long. Which is one of the reasons why I really enjoy the Tartaglia fight, because for one, he looks intimidating. For two, he does a lot of damage, and it actually makes you think, unless you have no L at that point, you can just spam buttons. My Noel bias is showing. I'm sorry. They did nerf Tartaglia, but that was only for the story fight. Because there were certain categories, there were certain niche scenarios where you could get stuck in that fight if your world rank was in a weird mix, in a weird stage, usually around like 35 or 40. Like if you had just gotten to like 40 and you were trying to get into a story, fighting Tartaglia without a proper team was a nightmare. So it's understandable why they did that to a story. I'm glad they didn't do it to the actual boss fight itself, though. Oof, yeah, that is that is quite a big oof, isn't it? Uh, Bennett's six constellation. That is something that we definitely have to talk about, isn't it? That is definitely something we have to talk about. I wish there was a way to turn off constellations. I think that's one of the things that I would want for Genshin. It's like the simplest thing, but it would help a lot in certain scenarios. There are some constellations that you legit don't want. Like that, like Bennett's C6. There's a lot of cases where you don't want that. I think the way that MiHoYo Smart works is not they're not smart when it comes to final decisions. I think their designers are very smart though, because you can see a lot of the things that they do and that they apply to the game, and they're textbook perfect. Like they're good game design. It makes perfect sense when you put it into a timetable. It's just then you have management, and management wants a specific thing, and that's when you start to get Zhongli at release. Um, the damage increase that we got in 1.1, where setting the grass on fire would insta kill your characters. That's when you start to get that sort of stuff. Chongyun, yeah, Chongyun. One of my biggest problems with Chongyun for the longest times was his infusion. His infusion hurts so many characters that trying to use him at release was the hardest thing ever. I'm gonna be honest with you. Was Bennett If Bennett did not work the way that Bennett works, Chongyun support would probably be the worst support in the game. Maybe Amber. Um, I don't think it would be the worst, but he would definitely be one of the most annoying ones. Um, but we do have characters that can take advantage of it, so that problem kind of goes away when we have things like that. And Chongyun himself can actually take really good advantage of his own buff now, so it's not that annoying. Yeah, 5 stars by themselves. I'm gonna be honest, a lot of the 5 stars I just don't want to use. I think Mona is the only exception. Chi-Chi is the only other exception. Um, if I already have a main DPS, which I already do for the most part, I don't need any other 5 star, because in a lot of cases, if you don't have the specific compositions, they're not that helpful. Try to make a composition using only 5 star characters, and the composition will be significantly weaker than what you can accomplish with free-to-play resources. I'll tell you that right now. So, whale to win is not the way to go for it. It's definitely playing smart with your resources. I am free to play, and I consider that I have like every single thing that I ever want. I'm also extremely lucky, so don't take that as a sign of things to come. But it's not difficult in Genshin to start accumulating your resources early and go for specific characters that you want. At that point, getting the compositions that you want. And one of the best things about Genshin as well is that you can achieve that. It might take a while, but it is possible. And in the time that you're doing that, you will have a lot of fun. Pretty much all the characters that you get for free are insanely powerful. Kea is often underslept on. He is very, very strong, Ling is amazing in every category. So is Noelle. The Geo Traveler is crazy. And as you play through the game, it's very unlikely that you'll get characters that you can't use. I think the only two characters in the game that you can't use effectively are Lisa and Amber. And even Lisa has a lot of places where she fits really well. It's just hard to get her to that point. So, in terms of character design, almost every character is designed in such a way that it can feel very strong. And I do think that that is one of the beauties that the designers of Genshin managed to do with their character design. The other one being the story. The story is actually, well, fairly generic. It's surprisingly entertaining. I've been enjoying it quite a lot. I do think that as long as they keep up what they're doing so far and not shifting the goalpost by miles at a time, I think the life cycle for Genshin is looking pretty strong. They have a lot of very unique ideas that they can still implement, and it seems like they are doing that. Dendro is still another element that we have no knowledge about, and that has a lot of potential to influence the game, in both positive or negative for that matter. So we have a lot of things to look for. I do think we're going to get introduced to delusions at some point. That is definitely something that's going to happen, and that's going to be the first sign of power creep. Do I think it'll be a negative sign? It depends on the implementation. I've seen games that have similar style abilities like that of Neverwinter, and usually they end up either being the most broken thing ever, or they end up doing nothing. We'll see what delusions end up being. I think more than likely we're just going to be getting like the current artifacts that we have right now. You can equip like one delusion per character or per team, and every like 5 minutes you can activate it to get a powerful buff. That's my idea for delusions. We'll see what actually ends up happening. So like Chorus and Honkai, never played Honkai, but I would imagine they would work the same way. So yeah, if that's already a thing that's in Honkai, it's 100% happening in Genshin. The Leeway story was really fun. If you actually go back and take a look at the entire story, it makes absolutely no sense, but it is very fun to play. Buff Zhongli with a delusion, please no. Delusions right now are definitely Genshin's ace in the hole. I think it's good that they're showing it to us, and I also think it's good that they're hinting at it. I just hope that it won't become like the new meta, because I hate that. I hate that so much. I've seen a lot of games that have a similar thing where there's like this one artifact that gives you 20 seconds of increased power, and if you don't have that one artifact, you suddenly can no longer do any raids. Is it obvious that I've played Neverwinter? I think it's obvious that I've played Neverwinter. Delusion's main gimmick is likely to change element, yeah. It's not the only gimmick, though. At least story-wise. Gameplay-wise, it's probably gonna be the gimmick. Story-wise, they're essentially like an extra power buff that you get. Characters like Xiao are the only example that we have available of a character that has an element and also a delusion of the same element. So we know it's possible, which makes me think that they're not going to be only change element. It's likely going to be you either change element if you're a specific character, but more than likely it's going to be a buff. That's what I think, though. Again, we have very little information to go for, and MiHoYo likely doesn't even know themselves. Moonlight, yeah, honestly, that's kind of what you do right now. Right now, for Genshin, I would not recommend that you go for the most OP characters. I would recommend that you go with what characters do I have, what characters do I enjoy, and then start building around that, because that's the way that you're gonna be able to get the most out of it. And then if the gacha gives you something entirely different, that's when you start building around those characters that you got that are entirely different. And that's one of the ways that you'll have a different experience from everybody else in Genshin. Like, for me, I did not want my team. I hated Tartaglia. But I got Tartaglia, so I had to make the best out of what I got, and I think I did so. And I was aiming for other characters. I also did not want to get Albedo, but I ended up getting Albedo. I'm kind of happy about that one, though. The way that you should look at Genshin right now is more about play with what you have and look for something to aim for. I think that's the best way about it. Because spending money on the game is not going to make the game more fun. If anything, it's just going to make you miserable. Genshin is not a game where you can pay your way to victory. Will you pay your way to power? Yeah, absolutely. You will be significantly more powerful than what I can accomplish with my free-to-play account. Does that mean you'll have more fun? Probably not. Yeah, you can legitimately use anybody that you want. That is not a problem. Every character is usable. The only place where that is a problem is Abyss, and even that is probably going to get changed. I do legitimately think Abyss is going to be one of the first things to get changed in Genshin. As far as that goes, let's see, what else do we have? Metaslaves are only seeing Melt and Vaporize Teams viable. Yeah, and that's definitely not the case. Definitely not the case. Have you tried Electrocharge recently? Electrocharge is so fun, and it is so effectively. One of the things that you gotta remember about Genshin is that the power line is already very, very far to the right. All characters are very, very overpowered. The difference between effectiveness is not super high. Yeah, you have outliers like the Mona 1 million damage build, but that's an outlier. We can't even consider that a viable strategy outside of Abyss. A guild system would be amazing. I would like to see that. Yeah, Moonlight. Noelle teams, they usually end up being only 4-star characters. I think my Noelle team at the moment is Shang Ling, Fischl, Ning Wang, and Noelle. And that team is insanely optimized to boost Noelle. I have it so that I have almost permanent sweeping time because of the energy generation. And the damage is getting really, really high. One of the things about Genshin is once you have your first core team, you can start focusing on your Abyss team, and then your boss fighting team, and then that's kind of it. At that point, you start just focusing weapons and waifus or husbandos, because realistically, you don't need more. You can get to the power line of being able to beat all the content in Genshin relatively easily, and even with the worst luck in the game, you're still gonna get resources that you can take advantage of, in one way or another. It's just a matter of actually thinking about the future of your team, not just spamming randomly into different things. It's definitely Genshin is definitely a game where forward planning is going to help you a lot. Zhongli's birthday is on the 31st, really? Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, that is also so sad. Sometimes I use a team comp of Zhongli, Albedo, Sucrose, and Fischl, and Shade Ults. Yes, that is actually one of the most fun builds that you can do. Is it the most effective? No, absolutely not. Is it the most fun? Hell yeah. Am I gonna do it if I have the chance? Hell yeah. At the end of the day, again, the power line for Genshin is so far right to the point where most teams that you can build will be able to finish most content. The only place where that is not true is Abyss. But even for Abyss, it doesn't take much to get teams that work for it. And now that Abyss is going to be rotating to different elements every so often, people are going to be able to do that easier. And I don't expect Abyss to remain the way that it is. I know that oh god, when was it? It was like a month and a half ago. We got a questionnaire regarding what we hate about Abyss. And a lot of people answered that. and I think MiHoYo is. I don't say this about most companies, but it does feel like MiHoYo at a bare minimum has at least one person that actually listens to the community. Which is weird. I'm not used to that happening. Are Zhongli and Albedo good together? They're not ideal. I will say that right now. You will definitely get a lot more mileage out of the Traveler. If you want to use them together, they're not bad either. The damage itself is very good, and Albedo's energy generation is... it's fairly strong. It's not bad by any means. The one thing about the Zhongli Albedo composition is that you don't actually get that many benefits from having Albedo on the team. Albedo really works best when he can generate crystallized shields for a character that doesn't have shielding already, because at that point he's pretty much making them immortal. So a character that's a glass cannon is now not. So a lot of those weaknesses get removed, and you can take full advantage of this glass cannon character. Zhongli is not a glass cannon. He is probably the tankiest character that we have in the game. So giving him a support that makes him even more tanky is kind of... you're stacking too much. Will it work? Yeah, again, Albedo just does so much damage. He fits into every single team composition that you put him in. You will definitely get a better result from using the Traveler or Ningguang, though. So, if you already have that, I would not recommend that you spend your resources for that specific scenario, unless you really, really want Albedo. Again, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I would recommend that you look for other characters to take advantage of it, so that you don't waste resources, because resources are fairly difficult to get. They are a lot better than what they were. The new events that MiHoYo is putting out are very generous, in all honesty, and they help a lot. But it's still not enough to the point where you can just waste resources on specific characters that you're not going to use. Still, getting Albedo and a Zhongli team, not a bad thing whatsoever. The Albedo is like a very strong core for a lot of the Abyss teams. I've already mentioned during the stream quite a lot of teams that Albedo fits really, really well into. So getting him and having Zhongli at the same time is not the end of the world. It just means that you're going to have two different teams. Albedo best team is with Child and Baido. Honestly, probably. I still think the boys team is probably the best one, with Bennett, Chongyun, and Xingqiu. That's probably the best one, just in terms of utility provided and flexibility as a whole. Even the damage is pretty high. One of the things about me deciding what teams I want to use is that I usually look at the value propositions, whether I either want a team that's gonna let me do a lot of things at once, or I want a team that's very specific to a scenario that I need. For example, my Fire Lake team, that's the team that I've been trying to build for the longest time, I'm only ever gonna use it for bosses. I'm never gonna take it anywhere else. But I want it for bosses, because I want to be able to do my bosses as quickly as possible for days when I don't have time, so I'm working towards it. Is it going to be the main team? No, absolutely not. That's most certainly going to be the Albedo child team. But yeah, that's as far as that one goes. If you want to make a Geo DPS, you need a legendary weapon. Not necessarily. I think Zhongli shines really well with the Crescent Pike, to the point where he really does not need 5-star weapons. I know that Noelle, her highest potential is with 5-star weapons, like having the Skyward Spine or the Unforged or Noelle will help a lot, but the White Blind is so powerful by itself that you barely feel the difference, and in a lot of cases you even feel stronger with the White Blind. So it's not necessary. 5-star weapons are really good, but for my team, I have 14 characters that I plan on using and I think only one of them I would switch what I have right now with a 5-star weapon, and that's only Xiangling because I want the Skyward Spine on Xiangling just because of energy recharge and crit. That's probably the only character that I would want a 5-star weapon. 4-star weapons are very, very powerful, and the damage difference between both of them is very minimal in a lot of cases. Let's see. No one is using the shield weapons because they're made for Geo DPSs, and they can't beat DPSs. Yeah. I think a lot of people are not going to be able to take advantage of the new shield-based weaponry, mainly because they don't have the resources to take advantage of it. They're definitely something that you have to work towards, and the benefits that you get from them, they're good. Like, all of them are basically the Wolf's Gravestone, but you need the shield. So, unless you have Albedo, or Zhongli for that matter, most characters will not be able to get that. Xin Yan does enable it a little bit, so does Diona. They're slightly less reliant on it. Once we get more shield characters, I think people will begin using them a bit more. Which brings us back to another point where MiHoYo balances based on future content, which is not a bad thing, but also it does leave us with a lot of characters that just feel incomplete, or a lot of weapons for that matter. Noelle DPS, yeah, I remember when I made mine. I was so worried that I was just gonna waste all of my resources on something that wouldn't pan out. My god, was I wrong. Noelle carried me through the entire game. I had my DPS Noelle. I was using gladiators. I wasn't even using Bolide. She carried me. Like, from AR 20 something to like AR 45, it was all Noelle. I had nothing else. Like, my Xiangling had 0 artifacts. My Fischl had 0 artifacts, and my Traveler had, at most, I think I gave her like an Exile set. Because I was just using Noelle. Noelle is crazy good. Hu Tao. I've taken a look at Hu Tao. She, I'm just gonna say it. She's gonna be very generic. I don't think she's gonna be bad by any means. The design seems very, very powerful, but as far as spear DPS goes, she's gonna be generic. She has a lot of very interesting potentials that we want to see. I don't want to comment on Hu Tao too much because we just don't know enough. The character is barely being made. We only have like the base design, which is she's going to be an HP-based character that gets attack from HP and has HP regeneration on the kit. That's all we know. The attack that she gets from HP is very, very high, but it's not actually that much higher than other options. Like, I think Bennett is it's still gonna be a better buffer than Hu Tao, and unless her burst is insane, I just don't see what role she's gonna fit other than generic DPS. But again, this is because we haven't seen much from her. She's still being made, so I'm gonna save judgment until we actually, get animations, get proper numbers, see what the abilities are gonna end up doing, see if Ascension does anything. There's a lot of factors to see if a character is gonna be good. So, too early to talk about Hu Tao. She has a cute pet ghost. You know what? That's good enough for me. What can I say? I miss it, please. Yeah, honestly, Noelle is my next waifu. I'm to the point where I have gotten my teams that I want, and once you get to this point where you have a good core of teams that you know that you're going to be able to use, I think the best thing that you can do as free-to-play or even if you're a light spender or a heavy one, is to start focusing on the characters that you're actually going to use. So what I'm going to be doing from now on is I'm just going to be saving up all of my Primal Gems, and whenever there's a Noelle banner, I'm just going to roll for it. If I get a 5-star, cool. I'm more than likely not going to use it. Xiao and Jean may be strong for the wrestle and ult spam. Yeah, they're probably going to be really strong for ult spam. One of the things that goes unnoticed about Jean is that in terms of energy generation, Jean is actually one of the highest in the game. I think she generates what, like 12 energy particles every 18 seconds? That's pretty high. I think that's tied with the Traveler, and that's... Is there anybody else that generates as much energy? Bennett? I think that's it. Yeah, I don't think there's another character that generates more energy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Jean is tied for second place for most energy in the game. With so many characters who have relationships with each other, I'd really love it if they introduce something that makes it fun to put characters together. We do have the things that you can unlock about the relationships, but I see what you mean. Like if you were in co-op and the two characters would begin talking randomly at each other, that could be cool. I think that might be something they might do in the future once co-op gets more fleshed out. We gotta remember, Genshin is still in its infancy. They say it's a released game, but let's be real, we're beta testers. The problem with Anemo and Geo right now is you need a pretty particular composition for both of them. That is correct. Geo and Anemo characters by themselves, they're not very strong. When you put them in compositions, however, they become some of the strongest ones. The only exception is probably Jean, but just because Jean can fit a lot of roles because of her... She can build physically, and her heal won't get hurt in the slightest, and her energy generation is just very strong overall. So she's probably the one that stands out alone the most. In Geo, that would probably be Zhongli. Even Albedo is reliant on teams. Buff Zhongli at the very least, is probably going to be the only Geo character that stands out on its own. Noelle can't even function by herself. Like, her shield generates no energy, so unless you want to spend 2 minutes hitting an enemy in order to get energy that way, you're never going to activate Sweeping Time. Anemo don't have teams right now. There was one particular team that I had with Sucrose that I can't think of the top of my head that worked really well with Sucrose as the main DPS, abusing Alchemania, but that's a C4 variant that requires specific teammates, so yeah, I'll give that to you. Anemo does not have good teams right now. At least a core for Anemo characters is not ideal. I think Jean Ben team might be like the best one, but even then you're probably going to be missing quite a lot of damage against elemental shields. That's kind of one of the things about Genshin. You're really hampered by elemental shields. Still wondering when we're going to see Bido in the world. I'm honestly very surprised that we did not see Bido during the Archon quest. That caught me off guard. I thought for sure we were going to go into her ship and fight the giant snake monster that way. I didn't think we were gonna make a flying fortress out of deer magic. But hey, we got what we got. Make the imbalance worth it. Yeah. I think Geo is getting to that point. Anemo probably needs a little bit more. I do think that after the Geo buffs, Anemo is likely going to be the worst element. It's getting carried right now by the Benarier set. If the Benarier set was not in the game, Anemo would be near worthless. which is not something that I want to say, but it's kind of true. Do you think it would be realistic / smart for MiHoYo to introduce 4 character resonances? That's a good one. I don't think it's unrealistic because there's only so many permutations that you can add. I just don't know what you would even do. What would you do with 4 character resonances? Like, if you have Fire, Cryo, Electro, Geo, what does that scream to you? Because I can't think anything. It would either have to be a very generic buff that applies to those 4 elements, or just what we have right now. I don't know, it's an interesting idea, but I don't think Genshin is going to go into that direction. I wouldn't mind seeing it, though. It could definitely be interesting. Electro just needs better scaling late game. Yeah, it's not ideal right now. Electro Charge was one of the things that is starting to change that direction. But that relies on having specific characters, mostly Xingqiu at this point in time, so not ideal. Not ideal. I think if anything, all characters should have a multiplicative damage bonus. I don't think having just Hydro and having just Pyro be the only ones that are in that category is a good thing. I think both Electro and Cryo should also fit into that category. Then again, they also want to specialize specific elements to be different things. It's a hard balance. It's a really hard balance. I don't know what would be better for the game. That one's very hard to call. Oh, I see. That's what you mean by 4 character resonances. Yeah, that could actually be fairly easy to implement. Maybe if you get like if you manage to double resonance, you can get like an additional bonus based on which resonance you doubled with. That wouldn't be that bad. Still expecting the Archon to be a healer with a defibrillator. Again, I would not mind an Electro Healer. I think Electro Healers would probably be pretty good. There have been a lot of times where I've been team building, trying to find a healer, and I was just like, man, I wish I had an Electro Healer here. If that happens, and we get the Electro Archon, the one that's creating an isolationist country in which visions are being taken from the populace in order to make sure that only her has the power to control the nation, she turns out to be a healer. I mean, to be fair, Zhongli did get released as he did, so it wouldn't even surprise me at this point. Electro isn't bad, it just needs a scaling buff in damage and utility. I don't think Electro is bad, but it is true that it is one of the worst elements to have as your primary element for a DPS character. That is not a lie. It's probably one of the best support elements, but it does lack that flexibility. And when we have characters like Razor and Keqing, who are very clearly meant to be DPS characters of that element, you do feel the difference. So I can see where the sentiment is coming. I don't think you need to do much in order to buff Electro. A change to the resonance will probably help quite a lot. A change to the way that the elemental reactions work would also help quite a lot. I know that for the longest time, there was one particular thing in the game where every time that you did an Electro-based reaction, the Electro character would always be the detonator, regardless of if they were a primer or not. That could actually be a good thing. I don't know if they would ever do that because that was a bug, but having that as a permanent feature would not be the worst thing ever. It would probably hurt a lot for characters like Kaching and Racer, though, so maybe not the greatest idea. I think being able to choose who your detonator is when it comes to elemental reactions would be game changing for Genshin. So I don't know. It's definitely something that I want, but I can see the difficulties in getting that into the game. Yeah, canon doesn't seem to matter too much when it comes to character design. Otherwise, we would see Mona having multiple teleports. I would love that. I mean, I'm Mr. Portals for a reason. But Mona doesn't have a single teleport in the kit, even though we've seen her use that ability multiple times. Really sad. Alas. We shall see what ends up happening. Oh, Klee was also able to use that. Okay, that's interesting. Ah. Yeah. Power creeping Genshin. It's definitely one of those topics that's probably going to get me a lot of hate. I don't mind it. It's definitely a topic that we have to have at some point or another. Zhongli would be the best character in the game for years if canon mattered. I don't think Genshin's surviving 6,000 years. But they kind of want him to be that way. He's starting to look that way. We'll see what ends up happening. I don't think it's going to get out of hand, in all honesty. Even with the maximum damage buff, it's still not too different from what we already have available. Albedo can accomplish a similar result. It's just Albedo can't be a DPS at the same time, and he can't actually have massive damages. So never mind on that one. So yeah, we'll have to see what ends up happening with Zhongli. He's definitely going to be on the stronger side now. I don't see how he falls below S+ now. No joking, MiHoYo needs to wake up. It's kind of hard, really. I don't envy the position that MiHoYo put themselves in. It's one of those things where they can't buff too much, but they can't buff too little either. I think the second round of buffs was probably not ideal to announce it this early. I understand the reasoning. I do, because they need player feedback. They should be transparent. It's not a bad thing that they're telling us this, but it's also setting a very high expectation, which is worrisome. And they don't have a community manager that can deal with this. They desperately need a community manager that can talk to people and actually spread a little bit more of everything. I know there's MiHoYo devs that are talking to other people, but it's not to the scale that they need it to be. They need to have live streams like the ones that they do for their patches, specifically only to talk to the community. And that's a very difficult job. I don't even know if they can get somebody to do that. Seeing that you have Mona, you can test DPS Mona with a new set. I've actually done the math already. Surprisingly enough. It's not ideal. I'll tell you that right now. It works though. It works. It surprisingly works. I would not use it. Maybe with Xiangling. I'll have to double test. It's not bad. It's not bad whatsoever. Xiangling and Mona can get quite a lot of Vaporous combos specifically against bosses. So the damage is surprisingly sound. It's nowhere near Klee, but it's not that far behind. It really isn't. Let's see, the problem is, I won't tell names, there are many YouTubers out there, whales who have played gachas all their life. They feel happy getting Zhongli C6, and that's it. I think that's a different conversation that we should have at some point, because I don't think that that's a problem with Genshin as a whole. I think that's a problem with how we as a society have grown in the gaming part at least. Let's just not cut to the chase. Gacha games as a whole are designed to wring the life out of people. That's the design. They they want to abuse the deepest psychological fears and impulses that we have in order to try to get as much money from us. This is not a lie. This is just the fact. And it is really heart-wrenching to hear about people that will waste massive amounts of money on specific things without worry for the money that they're spending. It's kind of one of the things why I do want to keep on covering a lot of the things, because information in this game is very valuable, and when you start showing what other characters can do, even the lower characters, free-to-play characters even, like Shang Ling or the Geo Traveler, when you start showing that spending is not only not a necessity, but actually a hindrance to your fun, I think that's when we start getting a more positive community. The randomness is not the enemy. Randomness is something that has been in games and has been used for the longest time to make interesting experiences. The problem lies when you're using that randomness to try to exploit people. That's where we have a problem. Genshin it's no saint. It has and it will ruin a lot of people's lives. But I think the best way to go about it is to, for one, show it to people, and for the second part, show that it's not necessary, not in the slightest. But seriously, they don't believe how your Noelle conquered the Room 11 on the Abyss? Noelle is OP as hell. I have no idea how people look at Noelle and they see bad character. From somebody that comes from playing a lot of MMOs and playing a lot of games where survivability is often more important than DPS, I do not see how Noelle is as badly regarded in the community as she is. This character is busted. If you have her at her max C at C6, she's the character that I want the most in the game. You can give me any amount of C6 5-stars or a Noelle in the C6, and I will take Noelle. I know that's why I don't hype up the character strength much in beta. Yeah, Zhongli definitely showed a lot of people as to why not show that up. One of the reasons why I did my Zhongli video, the original one that I did, was because I wanted free-to-play people to take notice of Zhongli, because before all the things were going out, people were saying that Zhongli was going to be bad because it was a Geo character, and I've done a lot of the math when it comes to Geo characters, and I showed my reasoning on that video why, despite being a Geo character, the original release of Zhongli was going to be one that was going to be worth getting, and one that would help free-to-play players quite a lot in the future of the game. Now, the entire Zhongli debacle happened, and we all know that story. But yeah, I am definitely being a lot more careful when it comes to hyping up characters. For one, because I know that a lot of people are starting to trust my opinion quite a lot. I know that I'm still very low when it comes to subscriber count as well as the amount of reach that I have. But there are people that trust in my opinion, so I want to try to give the most concise, precise answer that I can. So I want to have as much data as possible before I talk about a character. I don't want to be just talking about with heart or anything like that. I want to be talking with facts about what you will get, what you should expect, what you should have if you're trying to get the character, things like that. I feel like that is more important. I could very easily just start making videos like the one for Zhongli that are clickbaity as hell, and I would probably get money out of it. I would probably make quite a lot out of it, but that's just not me. So I don't want to do it. It would have been very easy for me to just see the success that Zhongli video was doing, and then just do that for like every upcoming character, but I actively decided not to do that. I think my videos are more helpful that way, and they're not just something that appears on the feed and people forget about after like 2 minutes. At least that's what I think. I don't know what everybody else thinks. Let's see, let's go ahead and take a look at the chat. The secret about Noelle is that she uses some mechanics exploited in other games, ignored in Genshin. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. If you take full advantage of Noelle's crystallized shields, if you take full advantage of animation canceling, if you take full advantage of the jump thing, if you take full advantage of defense stacking, if you take advantage of the buffs that you can apply before fights, Noelle is busted. Noelle is going to be on the Ganyu banner 100%. Well, I'm pretty much to the point where I don't care about characters anymore because I have everything that I ever wanted. Not the characters that I wanted. I wanted Xiao more than anything, but I'm not going to get Xiao anymore. I have the characters that I need to complete the content that I want to complete. That's the best way of putting it. So from now on, if I see Noelle in a banner, I'm rolling for her. Probably the same thing with Fischl. I don't think we're going to lose that much in the Geo Resonance. It looks like the Geo Resonance itself is going to be giving us way more power for Noelle. Having resistance reduction on the Resonance by itself is going to be pretty massive. And I don't think it'll change a lot of the things when it comes to how it's going to end up working. So Noelle is going to look a lot stronger now, which is always a positive on me, for me. It will be less powerful in specifically the Geo fights against the big Hilichurl and the Beth. I think that was her name. The Geo Hypostasis. That's the only place where Noelle is going to be noticeably worse. Everywhere else, she should be a lot stronger. Let's see, I think the Zhongli buffs include feature content and how challenges will be designed. I highly doubt that they're going to push out buffs this strong without thinking 3 steps ahead. See, I would have said that. I would have said the same thing, but then they released Zhongli. I know I'm memeing a bit, but it's true. I know for a fact that the people in MiHoYo have very smart people. That is very obvious to see just from the design of the game. But I also know for the fact that they also have very impulsive people. So it's gonna depend on which MiHoYo we get. Yeah, Tien. I was in that same boat that you were, and I was self-doubting myself all the time. At the very beginning, because at the very beginning, Noelle didn't feel strong, but I was like, but my math. So I just kept on going until she felt strong. And oh boy, does she feel strong. I did do a lot of math beforehand to make sure that I wasn't wasting my resources. And I definitely was not. Noelle carried me through the entire game. I did not put anything into any other character other than Noelle. I think at one point I got like an Electro Chalice on Fischl, and that's about it. I think I put some effort into Mona as well. But apart from... Mona didn't even carry me through the game, it was all Noelle. It was Noelle 100% of the way. Had to fight a boss? Noelle. Had to go through very difficult Abyss floors? Noelle. I managed to clear the floor for the Shangling without Noelle, but I had so much trouble doing so. It took me I think 2 hours. And then at that point I started building Noelle, and I did the next 3 floors of Abyss completely under level just with that Noelle. Especially when you use Superconduct. Oh, do you Okay, so here's one of the things for people using Noelle. Um, when you get enough energy recharge and enough energy generation to spam sweeping time, I want you to go into a group of enemies and then just charge attack. I know her charge attack is not strong, but it's the funniest thing you'll ever see. Because it hits multiple times. You'll do more damage just hitting normally, but it is funny to watch. Because the AoE is so massive. You just see crystallized shields everywhere, especially if you have something like Shangling. It's the Beyblade stance, I call it. Albedo or GOMC? That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I think GOMC is better. I think GOMC is better. The thing about Albedo is that he really excels when the teams are elemental. So, putting him on a Geo team that already has consistent access to Crystallize is not ideal. And since pretty much every single Geo character has consistent access to Crystallize, except maybe the MC, you just don't get that much benefit. Albedo, he doesn't play nice with a lot of Geo characters. He does enough to the point where he's a valuable support pick because energy generation of the Geo element, extra damage, really high extra damage, cheap to build. He's not a bad decision, but he's definitely not what you want for an optimized team. If what you want is specific optimization, if you want to make the best team possible, Albedo's not your choice. If you just want to have fun, go for it, it doesn't really matter. Rumors say there is international conflict in MiHoYo, especially about the Zhongli release. Internal. Okay. I would believe that. I would 100% believe that. It's fairly obvious that there's a group that wants him to be a DPS, and there's a group that wants him to be a support, and they're just having to compromise between each other. That might actually be the reason why he ends up getting so buffed. Because you have the two different groups, and they both have their own version of Zhongli, and management is just like, you know what, screw it. Both of you have Zhongli, you can both put a buff. It wouldn't surprise me if that's how it's actually going right now. Do you use Festering Desire or Hovering of Dawn on your Albedo? I use Festering Desire. Actually, I don't even use Festering Desire anymore. I'm using the Iron Sting. That's because my team composition at the moment is more focused on maximizing team output. So if I were to use the Harbinger of Dawn, I use Bennett as my healer. And when I'm playing, if I get hit once with Albedo, I will fall under the 90% requirement for the Harbinger of Dawn. When I'm playing, I don't pay attention to that. I'm used to playing with Noelle, so my health, I don't look at it. I became lazy like that, what can I say? I pay attention to this. But when I was changing my team into the Bennett as a healer, I was noticing that more often than not, my Albedo was not in the requirement for the Harbinger of Dawn. So I switched over to the Iron Sting, because I also wanted stronger shield, and I haven't regretted it since. The damage difference is not it's not super high once it's refined. I think I have mine like at refinement 2. It'll actually be higher than the Harbinger of Dawn once you get out of refinement 5. It's just the Harbinger of Dawn is so easy to get. If you don't have it at max refinement, the Harbinger of Dawn will be better in pretty much every scenario. It's not until you get it to max refinement where the Iron Sting becomes more effective because it gives you more shields. That's the only place where it becomes more effective. But that's max refinement of a craftable weapon, so you can get it, but when was the last time anybody got a prototype? I think in my entire time playing Genshin, I've only missed like 1 or 2 boss fights in the entire lifespan of the game, and I've only gotten 1 prototype during that entire time. And it was for a spear. What's Siren's thing again? It is the second craftable weapon. The reason why you don't know it is because nobody in the game could use it before Albedo. Albedo is the first character, maybe Bennett. Albedo and Bennett are probably the only two characters that can use this weapon effectively. Essentially, what it does is that every time that you deal elemental damage, your damage is increased by a small amount for, I believe it was like 10 seconds. I'll have to double look at it. It was for a long duration. You could keep it permanently with Albedo, that's all that matters. And that stacks twice. So after 2 elemental skills, your damage goes really high up. It also gives Elemental Mastery as a substat, so for my specific build, where I had Albedo as a Shatter Detonator, it was the better option. It just flat out was the better option. Even on my current build, where he isn't a Shatter Detonator, it's still better just because of how much more health the shield gets. At this point in time, the shields that I'm getting for Crystallize are so powerful that when I was doing Abyss, I was taking 0 damage. Like nothing was hurting me. Even the Electro Hammer dude, he was breaking the shields in a single hit, but the actual damage that I was taking from it was like 50 or 100, and I would just get the shield immediately again. It wasn't even a problem. Let's see. Let's take a look at the chat again. I think I'm probably going to be getting close to finishing the stream. We have been going for a very long time, and my voice is getting tired, and I still have to make the script for the Albedo video if I want to finish it before New Year's. So yeah, we're gonna answer a couple more questions, and then we're gonna go ahead and finish the stream. Let's see, Zhongli has such a weird and all over the place design. They do their full picture of him, then just kept erasing bits and adding weird details. Yeah, I fully agree with that. I think the original design that we got in the beta form was very clearly a DPS, and then it just started randomly getting support elements that didn't really make any sense. Like the petrification was the biggest that I've ever seen on an ability. So much to the point where even in my original video I just ignored it because it felt out of place, and it is out of place. It makes no sense as to why it is there. And there's a lot of really weird things. The shield design, it's fine because I understand it. With the geo damage, with the geo resonance and the Bolite set, it basically acts as a 55% extra damage bonus. A little bit higher because both of those, I believe, are multiplicative. I'll have to test that out. So it makes sense. It's an ability that increases damage and gives you an extra shield. Very powerful. But then we get Zhongli is meant to be a support, and then we ask the question, okay, who does he support? And then we get nothing but silence. So, yeah. The entire situation is weird. I think they're starting to shift towards a more community-focused approach, which I think is the right decision. That's probably one of the reasons why we're actually getting a lot of the things that we're getting. Otherwise, I was not expecting them to tell us anything about Zhongli for like months. I did not plan to talk about Zhongli until like late January, but here we are. We'll just have to see how the community reacts and how the actual management reacts to it. My hope is that we can manage to make a proper communication line with MiHoYo, where we can talk to people, give them our opinions, and then they can transfer the opinions to the development team. In a civilized manner, of course. Please let it be in a civilized manner. I doubt it's going to happen if I'm being real, but that's my hope. If you need to make teams with Super Geos, yeah, that was actually one of the things that I was thinking about it, because Geo is a very strong element. The only thing that hampers Geo is elemental shields. Take elemental shields out of the game, and I don't see a stronger element. Yeah, there's elements that are going to do more damage, but Are those elements gonna give you as much defense as Geo gives you? Are they gonna give you as much flexibility? I don't think they will. If it weren't for elemental shields, I think Geo would be like one of the strongest ones. And even now, we can see just how powerful Geo characters really are. Like, name one bad Geo character. Most people are gonna say Noelle. Noelle is not bad. Trust me on that one. I can't. Ning Wong is amazing. The Geo Traveler is amazing. Zhongli, once he gets his buff, he's gonna be amazing. Albedo's amazing. Noelle is amazing. I can see why they would want to limit the element. I just don't think it's the right decision, and they probably noticed that, which is why we're getting the Geo buffs. Will we get the same thing with Electro once the Electro Archon is released? I don't know. I don't know. Electro's definitely not as in a bad position as Geo is. So it wouldn't be that difficult to make Electro a good DPS option either. I think, if I'm being honest, they should probably just focus Electro as a support type, and then give the characters that have Electro bonuses, like that of Razor and Kaching, damage bonuses with the Dendro element. That would make the most sense as to how you would balance that out. Like, maybe make it so that if you combine Dendro with Electro, the characters get, like, a Gladiator bonus or something like that. I think that might be, like, a good way of balancing that out properly. 0 prototypes from all bosses. Yep, that seems to be the case for me as well. I've gotten all the size and little knickknacks that you could possibly ever want for the characters that I have. So I'm not complaining, but it's kind of surprising how little prototypes I've actually gotten. And then I talk to other people and they say, "Oh yeah, I've gotten like 7." I'm like, how? When? Am I missing a boss? Yeah, what makes Geo and Anemo different is how they work and just the power level of the characters themselves. The thing about Anemo is that it has a very strong delay on reapplying the element, and when it applies the element, it always does so as a detonator. So you can't prime things with Anemo. So that makes it really annoying for a lot of elemental reaction teams, and this is a problem that Xiao is going to have, because his elemental detonation is going to be very, very awkward. I think you might be able to get away with it by combining Xiao with Barbara and Bido, but that's still in the testing phase. We need to have Xiao released to see if that's even feasible. Geo should never have reactions or would be too strong. Well, about that one. Have you seen Freeze Comp Albedo? It is definitely too strong. It's not as strong as other characters, but it's just the fact that it works is what makes it so hilarious to me. Amber. Yeah. Our Pyro selection is not ideal. We do get Shangling for free, and Shangling is not bad in the slightest. So, as far as Pyro characters, I'm happy with that one. Poor Amber, man. I love her to death, but... God, is she bad. How do you play Pyro Impact without Pyro? Not wrong, it's a struggle. It is a struggle. Most of my teams did not have a Pyro character in them. Not easy. Not easy, I'll tell you that much. Now that Abyss is going to be changed a little bit, it's not going to be as notorious, but the wooden shields that the Hilichurls have, they are a nightmare to deal with if you don't have the Pyro element. And they are the most common enemy in the game, I swear to God. You see them all the time when you're doing your dailies. Geo does have a lot of buffs. That is the thing that makes it stand out the most. It's not only that they have a lot of buffs, it's that they have a lot of buffs that stack on top of each other. So getting things like the Archaic Petra, then on top of that the Geo Resonance, then on top of that the Bolite set, and then you just keep on adding and adding and adding and adding. It's very strong. It's very strong. And the things that makes it even stronger is that those buffs have a defensive utility to them, which allows you to play characters that would usually be glass cannons. They would realistically not be on the field out for too long. You make them way stronger like that, and it just keeps on stacking further and further and further. That's one of the things that makes Geo very strong. It's one of the things that makes Anemo strong as well because of the Banner Ear set, but again, if Anemo didn't have the Banner Ear set, a lot of the characters that we consider good would just not be played at all. Benti would probably be still be played, so would Jean, but I don't think many people would play Sucrose. And nobody plays the Anemo Traveler, so... Anemo Traveler's okay. I would not use her over the Geo one, though. Wasn't Geo a tank element? I mean, it's supposed to be. Doesn't feel like it. Like almost every element. You know what? Now that I think about it, Geo is a tank element. It's just we're not thinking about the MMO tank. We're thinking about the real life tank where it's impossible to destroy and it kills everything in sight. So translation error, I guess. We are the only community that loves Geo. Maybe. Might just be because of my might just be because I love Noelle so much, but realistically, Geo is not a bad element. There is no... Put Geo in any other game and tell me how it's bad. Geo has some of the most flexible characters with some of the highest potential in the game. Zhongli with the buffs, insane. Albedo, just right now, insane. Ning Wang with proper build, insane. Geo Traveler gives so much energy and can enable so many buffs, it's crazy. And Noelle does everything. DPS, heal, tank. What else do you want? What else do you want in Genshin? Once reactions are involved, they get screwed over. Yeah, but in all honesty, the crystallized reaction is very, very strong. If you look at it for what it is, and not just the reaction itself, it becomes powerful once you take into account all the extra factors that it adds to it. The shield itself can enable the use of the shield weaponry. It can also give you the Geo Elemental Resonance, which is the strongest resonance, period. Even in its current state with a buff, it's not even a question anymore. You also get things like the Bolite set, which is 40% extra damage to all normal attacks and charge attacks. If you want something like that, you need the Bloodstain set for other characters, and that's not even that efficient. It also gives you extra defense on set shields, which increases your overall health even more. Then you have the Archaic Petra, which increases the power of elemental characters even further. It's just, what other element gives you this much? Pyro gives you Vaporize, and that's about it. Overloaded is nice. Hydro gives you Electrocharge. Electrocharge is really powerful. Freeze is okay. But do any of them... Well, Freeze probably does. I just don't see how the other elements stack up together when it comes to elemental reactions, because the maximum damage for Electrocharge, don't get me wrong, it's really high. That's one of the reasons why I use it. But when you compare it to a 35% damage bonus on another element, I just don't want it. If I had the option between Electrocharge or just giving one of my characters 35% extra damage, I'd probably think that 35% extra damage, because over the entire lifespan of my attack, that'll do way, way more. So yeah, I don't see Geo as a weak element, and I don't see why people think it's a weak element. it's not only the damage bonuses, you're also getting the defensive bonuses. It's crazy. The biggest buff they gave Zhongli to make the shield not get in the way of bow charge attacks. Oh, I haven't even considered that. I hadn't even considered that. You're right. It's impossible to see in that state. Huh. I don't think that's gonna get fixed anytime soon. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Melt. Melt's okay. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, I'm underselling it a lot, but yeah. Melt and Vaporize are certainly the two strongest reactions in the game. It's just, in terms of value, that's all they do. Extra damage. Which, I mean, I guess it's the purpose of the game. But, it just doesn't feel fun, really. There's not many characters that can apply it consistently, either. Diluc and Clea are the exceptions, and they're the ones that are seen as the OP ones. Yeah, I'm playing around with it. Oh, okay, Melt and Vaporize are good. I just don't like them. They're too simple. They're not fun. They're effective. They're not fun. Let's see. For example, characters like Klee, Diluc, and Keqing all can invest into one form of damage. Yeah, that is one of the things that makes them very strong. Especially because you can buff that damage quite significantly through other means. I do think physical is probably the one that you can buff the most as it stands currently in the game. Just look at Xingyan for that. My god. If you ever see a C2 Xingyan that's properly built with like a Snow-Tombed Star Silver, a perfect goblet for Bloodstained, and the Noblesse set, the damage on that is insane. It's, what was the highest that I got it to? I think the highest that I got it to was like 1,500% scaling. With all the multipliers that you can apply. You can probably get it higher. That's the highest that I got it to. Yeah, it is getting insanely late. I should probably end the stream right about now. Yeah. I do think we've been going on for pretty much almost like 3 hours. My voice is starting to get hurt, and I still need to spend like 3 hours writing a script for the Albedo video. So, with that out of the way, I do think this is going to be the end of the stream. If you enjoyed, thank you very much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. With that, portals